Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. The cold bit through my gloves as I checked the straps on my snowshoes. 40 below zero, and I was heading deeper into the woods. Some people would call me crazy. Maybe I am. My name is Marcus Thornton. I fought in Korea, patched up boys who should have been at home with their mamas, not bleeding out in my arms. Now I work for the Forestry Service in northern Minnesota, where the trees are older than anything I know, and the silence is a blessing most days. Today wasn't most days. The storm was coming in faster than expected, clouds heavy and dark above the pines. I needed to check the cabins on the North Shore before the blizzard hit full force. Radio said it might be the worst in 30 years. As I trudged through the snow, something felt off. The forest was too quiet, no birds. No squirrels, nothing, just my own breathing and the crunch of snow under my feet. I stopped at a clearing, and that's when I saw it. A deer carcass, splayed open, but not eaten. Just arranged, like someone was displaying it. Around it, 3 rabbits positioned in a perfect triangle, their dead eyes staring up at the grey sky. What the hell, I muttered, my breath clouding in front of me. No predator I knew hunted like this. Not wolves, not bears, nothing natural. I knelt down, the snow creaking beneath my weight, and touched the deer's flank, frozen solid, but no signs of normal predation, just clean, almost surgical cuts. My stomach turned as memories from the war flashed through my mind. Field hospitals, blood-soaked stretchers. The wind picked up suddenly, whistling through the trees. It sounded almost like a voice. Looking up, I realized the daylight was fading fast. It was only mid-afternoon, but the storm clouds were stealing the sun. I needed to reach old Bob's cabin before dark. Maybe he'd know what to make of this. I stood, adjusted my pack, and felt the weight of my father's hunting knife at my hip. As I moved away from the clearing, the silence seemed to follow me, pressing in from all sides like a living thing. Something was wrong in these woods, and whatever it was, it had just begun. I woke to the crackle of the radio. Through the static I heard the news. Jack Winters had been missing for 2 days now. Jack was a good hunter, knew these woods better than most. Him getting lost didn't make sense. Marcus, you copy. It was Thomas, the new ranger. Kid was only 25, still believed everything would work out if you just followed the rules. Yeah, I copy, I said, rubbing sleep from my eyes. They want us to join the search for Jack. Can you meet me at his last known location, near Blackwater Lake? I'll be there in an hour, I promised, looking out the window at the swirling snow. The storm had only gotten worse overnight. By the time I reached Thomas, my fingers were numb despite my gloves. His face was red from the cold, but his eyes were bright with excitement. This was an adventure to him. To me, it felt like walking back into battle. Look at these, Thomas said, pointing at the ground. Jack's campsite was a mess. His tent was torn, cooking gear scattered. But what caught my eye were the footprints in the snow. They looked human, but wrong, too long, with toes that spread wider than normal. And they were deep, like whatever made them was very heavy. What do you think made these? Thomas asked. Don't know, I lied. I'd seen tracks like these once before, in an old book of Bob's. But that was just stories. We packed some of Jack's things to bring back and started setting up our own camp. That's when I noticed our food packs. The jerky I'd packed that morning was black with mold. The canned beans had burst open, contents reeking of rot. That's impossible, I said. I just packed this stuff. Thomas frowned. Then his stomach growled loudly. I'm starving, he said. Didn't you eat breakfast? We both did, I reminded him. Big plates of eggs and bacon at the station. Thomas looked confused. "I don't remember eating," he said. "God, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse." The wind picked up again, howling through the trees, but underneath it, I thought I heard something else. A low, rattling breath. I gripped my father's knife and tried to ignore the chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Morning came with no relief. The snow fell harder, piling up around our tent. We needed to move, to keep searching for Jack. "Storms getting worse," I told Thomas as we packed up. "This isn't natural. It wasn't just my imagination." Every time we tried to head north, toward an area I wanted to check, the wind would suddenly pick up, blasting us with ice and snow until we changed direction. "Your ears are white," I told Thomas around noon. "We need to check for frostbite." "I'm fine," he snapped, then looked surprised at his own anger. "Sorry, Marcus, I'm so hungry." I handed him the last of our good food, a chocolate bar I'd kept in my inner pocket. He ate it in 2 bites, but still looked starved. That's when I heard it, a woman's voice, soft and sweet, calling my name. "Marcus, come home, Marcus." I stopped dead in my tracks. It was Claire's voice, my wife's voice, but Claire had died 5 years ago, before I ever came to Minnesota. "Did you hear that?" I asked Thomas. He shook his head, looking at me strangely. We pushed on until we found Dr. Foster's research station, a small cabin where she studied winter wildlife. The door swung open in the wind. Inside, everything was a mess, like she'd left in a hurry. Her journal lay open on the desk. I flipped through the pages while Thomas tried to get the stove working. "Local wolves showing strange behavior," I read aloud. "Metabolism rates off the charts. Bears coming out of hibernation. Despite temperatures, all animals displaying extreme hunger." The last entry made my blood run cold. Something in the woods is affecting everything. Not natural, not scientific. God help us if the legends are true. Night fell too quickly. The darkness outside seemed thicker than it should be. Thomas's face looked gaunt in the lantern light, his eyes sunken. "Do you smell that?" he whispered, sniffing the air. "Smell what?" "Meat cooking. Roast beef, I think. Don't you smell it?" His eyes were wild, desperate. There was nothing cooking, nothing but the howling wind and the creak of the cabin's old wood, and something else. A sound like massive feet crushing the snow outside. Something big circling the cabin. Thomas didn't seem to hear it. He just kept talking about how hungry he was, how good the imaginary food smelled. I put my hand on my knife and watched the door, waiting. We left Foster's cabin at first light, though the sky stayed dark grey. Thomas stumbled beside me, complaining about hunger pains, despite the breakfast we'd found in Foster's supplies. "We need to check on old Bob," I said. "His cabin's not far." Bob Erickson had lived in these woods for over 50 years. If anyone knew what was happening, it would be him. When we reached his cabin, something was wrong. The windows were covered with wooden boards. Strange symbols were carved into the doorframe, circles with lines through them, stars with 2. Many points. "Bob?" I called, knocking hard. "It's Marcus Thornton." Silence, then a shuffling sound. "Who's with you?" came Bob's voice, thin and scared. "Just Thomas, Forest Service." The sound of locks turning. Then the door opened just enough to see Bob's weathered face. His eyes darted past us, scanning the trees. "Get in quick," he said, pulling us inside and slamming the door. He locked it with 3 different bolts. The inside of Bob's cabin was worse than the outside. More symbols drawn everywhere, on the walls, the ceiling, even the floor. The fireplace was blazing hot, but the old man still shivered in his heavy sweater. "It's back," Bob whispered. "The winter spirit, the hunger that walks." "What are you talking about?" Thomas asked, but I already knew. I'd heard Bob's stories before, just never believed them. Bob pulled out a stack of journals from under his bed. "Every 20-30 years, he said, opening one to show us. "When the winter is harshest, people go missing, always the same signs. The journal showed newspaper clippings dating back to the 1930s, missing hunters, rangers finding strange animal remains, people reporting voices in the blizzard. Wendigo, Bob said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The Algonquin tribes warned the first settlers, a spirit of hunger and winter, or a man changed by eating human flesh in desperate times. Either way, it hunts now. Thomas laughed, but it sounded hollow. That's just stories to scare kids. Bob's eyes narrowed. You feeling hungry, boy? More than you should? Smelling food that ain't there? Thomas went pale. I flipped through Bob's journals while they argued. One page showed a map with X marks in different places around the lakes. Dates next to each X, places where bodies were found. There's one more thing, Bob said finally. Found it yesterday. He opened a closet door. Inside was Jack Winter's backpack, covered in blood. Found it near my woodpile, and these tracks leading away. Bob handed me a piece of paper with a drawing. The same elongated footprints we'd seen. Where's Jack? I asked. Not Jack anymore, Bob whispered. Not if he's still moving. That night, I couldn't sleep. Thomas tossed and turned on Bob's floor, mumbling about food. And outside, through the howling wind, I swore I could hear Jack's voice calling for help. I woke to silence. The storm had stopped, and so had Thomas's breathing beside me. His sleeping bag was empty. "Thomas?" I called, my voice too loud in the quiet cabin. Bob was still asleep in his bed. I checked outside. Thomas's tracks led from the door into the dark woods. "Bob, wake up," I said, shaking the old man. "Thomas is gone." Bob was on his feet faster than I thought possible for a man his age. "When?" "Sometime in the night. I need to find him." "No." Bob grabbed my arm. "That's what it wants. To separate us." I pulled away. "He's just a kid. I'm going." I took my pack, my knife, and a flare gun from Bob's supplies. The old man pressed something else into my hand, a small pouch that smelled of herbs and burnt pine. "Keep this close," he said. "And if you find the boy, make sure it's really him before you bring him back." The forest was dead quiet as I followed. Thomas's tracks. They started normal, but gradually changed. Longer strides, deeper prints, like he was running or being chased. The tracks led to the base of a cliff where a dark opening yawned in the rock. A cave. Thomas's footprints went straight in. I flicked on my flashlight and followed. The cave smelled of wet stone and something else. Something rotten. The beam of light caught something gleaming on the walls. Ice? No. Too thick. Too yellow. Like amber or tree sap. The cave opened into a larger chamber. My light fell on something that made me stop breathing. Jack Winters hung from the ceiling, wrapped in that same yellow substance. But it wasn't really Jack anymore. His body was twisted, stretched, like something had pulled on his limbs until they were twice their normal length. His jaw was dislocated, mouth open impossibly wide, and his stomach had bite marks, human teeth marks, like he'd tried to eat himself. A sound behind me, a wet, smacking noise like someone chewing. I swung my light around and saw Thomas. He was hunched over something, his back to me. His shoulders looked wrong, too high, too sharp. "Thomas?" My voice echoed. He turned slowly. It looked like Thomas, but his eyes were all wrong, black and hungry. Blood covered his mouth and chin. "So hungry, Marcus," he said. But the voice wasn't his. It was Jack's voice coming from Thomas's mouth. "You don't know what real hunger is." Behind him, I saw what he'd been eating. A wolf carcass, torn open. "Where's Thomas?" I demanded, backing toward the cave entrance. Not. Thomas stood up and kept standing. His body unfolded, growing taller, limbs stretching. His face rippled like water. "Thomas is here," it said, tapping its chest. "So hungry, he couldn't resist." I ran. Behind me, something fast scraped on the cave walls, gaining on me. The daylight at the entrance seemed miles away. Just as I reached the mouth of the cave, a pack of wolves appeared, snarling at something behind me. The creature shrieked, a sound like breaking ice and dying animals. I didn't look back. I ran all the way to Bob's cabin, but when I got there, the door hung open, swinging in the wind. Inside, Bob lay on the floor near the fireplace. He'd shot himself with his old hunting rifle. His journal lay open beside him with a single line written in shaky letters. Better this way than being taken. I couldn't stay in Bob's cabin with his body. I took his journals, the herb pouch, and his rifle, then headed for the ranger station. Maybe Dr. Foster had gone back there. Maybe someone was still alive. The sun never really rose that day. The sky stayed a dull gray, and the forest felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. I kept the rifle ready, jumping at every sound. When I reached the station, smoke was rising from the chimney. Someone was there. I approached carefully, looking through the windows before knocking. Dr. Foster sat at the radio, trying to call for help. Relief washed over me until I noticed the blood on her coat sleeve. "Foster," I called, knocking on the glass. She jumped, then rushed to let me in. "Marcus! Thank God. Have you seen Thomas?" I locked the door behind me. "We need to talk." I told her everything. The cave, Jack's body, what happened to Thomas, and finding Bob. She listened without interrupting, her face getting paler by the minute. "I've been studying metabolic changes in the wildlife," she said when I finished. "Every animal in the region is showing signs of extreme hunger. Bears, wolves, even the birds. They're eating things they shouldn't, attacking each other. It's not just the animals," I said, putting Bob's journals on the table. "It's been happening here for generations." We spent hours going through Bob's writings. The Wendigo always appeared during the worst winters. It started by affecting the animals. Then people would go missing. It could make itself look like its victims. It could make you hear voices of people you knew, especially those who were dead or far away. Bob wrote that it targets people already familiar with extreme hunger, I said, thinking of my time in Korea when our unit was cut off behind enemy lines for 3 weeks. We'd nearly starved, or people with psychological weakness to hunger, Foster added, pointing to another passage. People who use food for comfort or who have unhealthy relationships with eating. That explained Thomas. He was always snacking, always thinking about the next meal. Foster showed me her research notes. The Wendigo affects metabolism somehow, makes victims burn calories at an impossible rate. They're literally starving to death within days, no matter how much they eat. "How do we stop it?" I asked. "Bob's journals mention herbs and symbols that can protect against it," she said. "And there's a ritual that might bind it, but..." Her stomach growled loudly, and she looked embarrassed. "Sorry, haven't eaten since yesterday." I opened my pack to share my rations, but a sudden thought made me hesitate. "When did you last eat, really?" She looked confused. "Last night. I had soup. The kitchen was clean. No signs of anyone cooking soup." "And you're hungry now? Really hungry?" Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying, Marcus?" Before I could answer, the radio crackled to life. Thomas's voice came through, weak and scared. "Hello? Anyone there? I'm hurt. Please." Foster reached for the radio, but I grabbed her wrist. "That's not Thomas," I said. "Not anymore." My own stomach rumbled then, and for a second I smelled my wife's apple pie baking. My mouth watered even though I knew it wasn't real. The hunger had found us all. Morning came with no sunrise, just a lighter shade of grey. Foster and I had taken turns sleeping, never both at once. Trust was in short supply. "We need these," I said, showing her a page from Bob's journal. It listed herbs and materials for protection rituals: sage, cedar, pine resin, and symbols drawn with ash. "There's a tribal healing shop in town," Foster said, "but the roads are blocked with snow." "Check the storage shed," I suggested. "Rangers keep emergency supplies." While Foster searched the shed, I studied the maps in Bob's journal. He'd marked the places where people had disappeared over the decades. A pattern emerged, a circle around one specific area deep in the woods. Foster returned with an old emergency kit. Inside was a native medicine bundle with most of what we needed. "Look at this," I said, showing her the map. "Every disappearance forms a circle around this spot, like it's protecting something." "What's there?" she asked. "Just an old limestone cave system, according to this. The natives called it the Hungry Mouth. We spent the day preparing. I made protective pouches while Foster drew symbols on the doors and windows with ash mixed with pine resin. "I've been tracking the Wendigo's movements," Foster said, spreading her own map on the table. She'd marked sightings of strange tracks and animal kills. "It hunts in a pattern, 3 days in one area, then moves. And it's been near us for 2 days now," I realized. Foster nodded. "Tomorrow it will be closest to us, most dangerous." As night fell, the radio crackled again. This time, it was Thomas's voice, then Jack's. Then they overlapped, creating a chorus. "Of pleas for help," Foster covered her ears. "Make it stop." I turned the radio off, but the voices continued, softer now, like they were coming from just outside the windows. That's when I noticed Foster's pack on the floor. It was open, revealing candy bars, beef jerky, and other food she'd never shared. "What's this?" I asked, pointing. Her face changed, hardened. "Emergency supplies? You've been hoarding food while we shared rations?" "I need more than you," she snapped. "My metabolism is different." The same words from Bob's journal. The first sign of the Wendigo's influence, secret eating, growing paranoia. "We need to stick to the plan," I said carefully. "Tomorrow we'll set the trap using the symbols and herbs." Foster nodded, but her eyes kept darting to the windows. Outside, the voices had stopped, but something else had started, a rhythmic thumping, like a massive heartbeat in the snow. Neither of us slept that night. I kept my hand on Bob's rifle and noticed Foster had found a hunting knife. We watched each other across the room, our breath clouding in the cold air despite the fire. My stomach felt hollow, a bottomless pit. And in my mind, I kept seeing the feast we'd have tomorrow, once this was all over. Dawn brought a strange stillness. The wind had died completely. Not a branch moved in the forest. Too quiet. "Ready?" I asked Foster. We'd barely spoken since discovering her hidden food stash. She nodded, her face gaunt despite having eaten more than me. The Wendigo's effect on metabolism, I guessed. Or maybe she was already changing. Our plan was simple. Use the herbs and symbols to create a protected circle near the cave marked on Bob's map. The journal said the Wendigo could be temporarily trapped by the right combination of symbols drawn in ash. We packed our supplies and headed out. The snow had a hard crust that crunched under our boots, announcing our movement to anything listening. "How much further?" Foster asked after an hour. Her voice sounded rough, hungry. "Another mile," I said, checking Bob's map. "There's a clearing near the cave entrance." When we reached the spot, I felt my heart sink. The clearing was perfect for our trap, too perfect, like something had prepared it for us. "Let's work fast," I said, unpacking the ash mixture and herbs. Foster took the east side, me the west. We worked in silence, drawing the symbols from Bob's journal in the snow, then tracing them with ash mixed with cedar and sage. As I finished my section, I realized Foster had stopped working. She stood motionless, staring at the trees. "Foster, I smell food," she whispered. "A feast." I drew my rifle. "That's not real. It's the Wendigo trying to..." Pain exploded at the back of my head. I fell face first into the snow, the world spinning. Rolling over, I saw Foster standing over me with a tree branch in her hands, her eyes wild and hungry. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," she said, but her voice didn't sound sorry at all. "But it promised me I won't be hungry anymore if I bring you to it." She dropped the branch and pulled out her knife. I kicked out, catching her knee. She screamed and fell. I scrambled to my feet, head throbbing, and ran for the trees. Behind me, Foster's scream changed, from pain to terror. I looked back to see something tall and thin step from the forest opposite me. It wore Thomas's face on a body that was stretched. and wrong, with arms that nearly touched the ground. Foster tried to run toward me, but the creature moved with impossible speed, grabbing her with long, bony fingers. Its jaw unhinged, opening wider than any human mouth could. I didn't wait to see more. I ran blindly through the forest, the sound of Foster's screams fading behind me. Snow began falling again, heavy, disorienting flakes that seemed to change direction, always blowing into my face no matter which way I turned. My head pounded from Foster's blow. Blood froze in my hair. I realized I'd dropped the rifle in the clearing. All I had was my father's knife and Bob's herb pouch. The wind rose suddenly, howling through the trees with a sound like laughter. I couldn't tell which direction I was going anymore. The snow swirled around me in patterns that made me dizzy, and behind me, gaining, came the sound of something running on all fours, faster than any human or animal should move. I ran until my lungs burned. The forest blurred around me, trees whipping past. I had no plan except to get away. Then I saw it, a gap in the rocks ahead, the cave entrance from Bob's map. The hungry mouth. I didn't want to go in, but the sounds behind me were getting closer, branches snapping, snow crunching under something heavy. I had no choice. The cave mouth was narrow, barely wide enough for my shoulders. Inside, it opened, into a larger chamber lit by a strange blue glow. Ice crystals covered the walls, shimmering like stars. "Think, Marcus," I whispered to myself, trying to remember what Bob's journal said about the Wendigo, the herb pouch, the symbols. But I had no ash to draw with. A scraping sound came from the cave entrance, claws on stone. It was coming. In desperation, I pulled out my knife and cut my palm. Blood welled up, warm against my frozen skin. "Blood can replace ash in the binding," Bob had written, "but the price is higher." I started drawing the symbols on the cave floor with my blood, working from memory, praying I got them right. The circle, the crossed lines, the strange angular shapes that Bob had copied from tribal elders. The scraping got louder. I worked faster, my hand throbbing. Just as I completed the final symbol, the creature entered the chamber. It wasn't pretending to be human anymore. It stood over 8 feet tall, its body skeletal and stretched. Antlers crowned its skull-like head. Its skin was pulled tight over bones, grey-white like old ice. And its eyes, black pits that seemed to pull at me. "Marcus Thornton," it said, using Thomas's voice, then Jack's, then Foster's, all overlapping. "Always so hungry." The smell hit me then, roasting meat, fresh bread, my wife's apple pie. My stomach cramped violently. "You know real hunger," it continued, taking a step toward me. "In the war. Remember, 3 weeks without food. You and your friends hiding in that bunker." The memory flooded back. The hunger so bad we couldn't think straight. How we'd considered terrible things. "You wanted to eat the dead," the Wendigo said, taking another step. "Your friend Mitchell, after the fever took him, you thought about it." "Stop," I gasped, backing up until I hit the wall. "Join me," it said, its jaw unhinging to reveal rows of needle teeth. "Never be hungry again." I could feel its pull, a desire to give in, to end the hunger forever. Part of me wanted to step forward, to let it take me. Then I felt the weight of my father's knife in my hand. Dad, who'd taught me to hunt, to respect the forest, who'd said true strength was knowing when not to take a life, even when hungry. The Wendigo stepped toward me and crossed into the blood circle. It shrieked immediately, a sound like breaking ice and dying wind. Its body convulsed, limbs twisting. I pulled the herb pouch from my pocket, emptied it into my bloody palm, and spoke the words Bob had written. "I bind you to your hunger. I bind you to this place. By blood freely given, the circle holds." The creature thrashed against invisible walls, its form flickering between Thomas, Jack, Foster, and its true shape. "Not enough blood," it hissed. "The binding is weak." It was right. I could feel the circle weakening already. The symbols needed more. Without hesitation, I drew my knife across my arm, deep enough that blood flowed freely. I stumbled forward, painting the symbols again with fresh blood, strengthening them. The Wendigo screamed, this time in fear. "I've known hunger," I told it, my vision growing dim from blood loss. "I know its voice, and I reject it." The cave began to shake. Rocks fell from the ceiling. The Wendigo cowered in the center of the blood circle, its form shrinking, twisting. With the last of my strength, I staggered toward the exit. Behind me, the cave collapsed with a roar that shook the mountain. Then darkness took me. I woke up in the hospital in Duluth. They told me a search party found me half frozen at the base of a cliff. I'd lost 3 fingers on my left hand and 2 toes to frostbite. But I was alive. The official report said Dr. Foster, Thomas, and Jack Winters all died in the record-breaking blizzard. They found what was left of Thomas and Foster in the clearing where we'd tried to set our trap. Jack's body was never recovered. Nobody asked too many questions about the cave-in or the symbols drawn in blood. They put it down to delirium from blood loss and exposure. The tribal elders who visited me didn't need explanations. They nodded knowingly and left bundles of herbs by my bed. After I was released, I went back to Bob's cabin. It seemed right. Somehow, I buried him properly behind the cabin, under the old pine he loved. Inside, I hung his journals on the wall alongside my own account of what happened. Future rangers should know. Someone should always know. The first week was the hardest. The hunger never left me. I'd eat until I was stuffed, but 10 minutes later, my stomach would feel hollow again. The doctors said it was normal after extreme cold exposure. My metabolism was just readjusting, but I knew better. At night, I still heard voices in the wind. My wife Claire, Thomas, Foster, calling me to join them. I kept Bob's symbols carved above every door and window. Spring arrived slowly. The snow melted, revealing the forest floor. Tourists and campers returned to the boundary waters. Life went on, but sometimes, when the wind blows from the north, I catch a scent like rotting meat and fresh snow. The forest goes quiet, and I know it's still out there, not dead, not destroyed, just sleeping. Last week, a new ranger arrived at the station. Young guy named Miller. He eats constantly, snacking all day. Says he can never seem to get full. I invited him to dinner at Bob's, my cabin. I'll tell him some stories, show him Bob's journals, teach him the symbols, because someone needs to be the guardian. Someone needs to warn the next generation about the hunger in the ancient pines. And as I watch the first snow of autumn begin to fall, I wonder if this winter will be as harsh as the last. I touch the scars on my palm and arm and pray the binding holds, but deep down, I know the truth. The Wendigo is patient. It can wait decades between feedings, and it's always hungry. The wind died down just as I stepped out of my truck. Too quiet. That's never a good sign in these mountains. Beth Miller, a tall man with worry lines etched into his forehead, approached me, hand extended. "I'm Daniel Hoffman, search team leader. Thank God you're here." I nodded, shouldering my pack and grabbing my rifle case. I didn't come to make friends. I came to find missing hikers before the mountain claimed them for good. "How many?" I asked, scanning the small ranger station. 3 official vehicles, 1 news van, and a cluster of worried-looking volunteers huddled near a map pinned to a bulletin board. 4 hikers. All experienced. They were due back 3 days ago. Daniel fell in step beside me. The weird thing? His weather's been perfect. No reason for them to get lost. I'd heard that before. The mountains don't need bad weather to kill you. Inside the station, a young woman with a camera hanging around her neck broke away from the group. "You're the tracker, right? The ex-Olympian." Her eyes lit up with recognition. "I've read about your rescues." "And you are?" I asked, setting down my gear. "Meredith Wilson. I'm documenting Appalachian folklore for National Geographic." She lowered her voice. "The locals are saying strange things about Devil's Backbone. I'd heard it all before. Every mountain had its monsters. What mattered were the tracks, the terrain, and time. We were running out of it. Ms. Miller, a uniformed park ranger, approached. Kyle Jennings. I've marked their planned route on the maps. As I studied the trail, Meredith slid some photographs across the table. Tree trunks marked with strange symbols. Not trail markers I recognized. Found these near where they were camping, she said. Locals say, I don't need folklore. I cut her off. I need facts. But as I packed my search gear, the scar on my cheek began to throb. An old wound that always seemed to know when something wasn't right. And nothing about this mountain felt right. We head out in 20 minutes, I announced. And we need to move fast. The weather won't stay this calm for long. I could feel it in my bones. Devil's Backbone was watching us, waiting. The sun was starting to sink when we found the campsite. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. Stay back, I told the others, crouching to study the ground. Something's not right. 4 tents stood in a small clearing. No fire pit, no smell of food, just silence. I circled one tent, then stopped cold. Daniel, I called softly. Look at this. The tent was slashed from the inside, like someone was trying to get out in a hurry. All 4 tents were the same way. Could be bears, Kyle suggested, but his voice shook. I shook my head. Bears don't do this, and bears don't take hiking boots. I pointed to 4 pairs of boots neatly lined up outside one tent. No one leaves their boots behind in these mountains. Meredith raised her camera, but it just clicked uselessly. That's weird. Battery was full this morning. One by one, everyone's phones and flashlights started to die. Daniel's radio crackled with static, then went silent. Everyone stay calm, I said, though my own heart was racing. Kyle, where are the search dogs? Kyle turned, whistling for the German shepherds. They came, but something was wrong. Their tails were tucked, ears flat against their heads. The lead dog growled, backing away from the trail I wanted to check. They're scared, Kyle said. I've never seen them act like this. The forest had gone deadly quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. Listen, I whispered. Everyone froze. I don't hear anything, Meredith said. Exactly. That's when we heard it. Someone stumbling through the brush. A man in tattered clothes appeared at the edge of the clearing, his eyes wild and unfocused. He collapsed before anyone could reach him. James, Daniel gasped, turning the man's face toward us. James Porter, where are the others? James was burning with fever. His lips cracked and blue from cold, despite the sweat on his face. His eyes opened for just a second. It knows your voice, he whispered. It knows what you love. Then his eyes rolled back, and he started to shake. Night was coming, and something told me we shouldn't be here when it did. I barely slept that night. We set up camp a mile from where we found James, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. James woke up around dawn, shivering despite the 3 blankets we'd wrapped him in. His eyes darted around our camp, looking for something none of us could see. James, I said gently, what happened out there? Where are your friends? He grabbed my wrist, his fingers ice cold. It took them, one by one. What took them? Daniel asked, kneeling beside us. James's eyes went wide. Man with a wolf's head. It called to Lisa using my voice. Then it called to me using hers. Tears filled his eyes. It sounded exactly like her, begging for help. Meredith moved closer, recording everything on her backup tape recorder. Did it look like a person in a costume or an animal? James shook his head hard. Neither. Both. It walked like a man sometimes, then on all 4s. Its eyes he covered, his face with trembling hands. They glowed in the dark. Kyle cleared his throat. The locals call it the devil's dog. There've been stories since I was a kid. Hikers hear someone they know calling for help. They go looking and... He trailed off. I always thought it was just stories to keep kids from wandering off. There's more, Kyle admitted. Back in the 50s, a whole research team vanished on this mountain. The official report said it was an avalanche, but my grandfather worked rescue back then. He said they never found bodies, just empty tents, like the ones we found yesterday. Our radios crackled to life suddenly, making us all jump. Through the static, I could hear what sounded like voices whispering, followed by a low, rumbling howl that made the hair on my neck stand up. I walked away from the others, studying the ground around our camp. That's when I found them. Tracks in the soft earth. Some looked like a large wolf, but others showed a creature walking on two legs with paws as big as my hand. The tracks circled our entire camp. Whatever made them had been watching us all night. We need to move, I told the others, trying to keep my voice steady. Now. James shook his head, eyes wild with fear. It doesn't matter. It knows where we are. It can smell your fear. I checked my rifle, counting bullets. I'd come to rescue hikers, not hunt monsters. But as the shadows grew longer around us, I wondered if I'd brought enough ammunition for whatever was hiding in these mountains. Beth, can I show you something? Daniel asked as the rest of the team set up our new camp. His face was tight with worry. I nodded, following him down a narrow trail that led to a steep ravine. The sun was getting low, casting long shadows between the trees. I found these while scouting ahead, he said, pointing to a line of trees. Each trunk was marked with deep claw marks, too high for a normal animal. Some looked like symbols, not random scratches, but deliberate marks. Something's marking its territory, I said, running my fingers over the gouges in the bark. Something big. A sudden gust of cold wind rushed up from the ravine, carrying a smell like wet dog and something worse, something rotting. There's something else, Daniel said, leading me further down the path. An old building. Hidden among the trees stood a small concrete structure, half buried in the hillside. The metal door hung open on rusty hinges. Mining office, I guessed, shining my flashlight inside. Dust covered everything. Old desks, filing cabinets, a faded map of tunnels pinned to the wall. But one drawer in a metal cabinet looked recently disturbed. Inside, we found yellowed folders stamped Classified and Project Cerberus. What the hell? Daniel muttered, flipping through papers filled with scientific notes and diagrams of animal. Vocal cords. My flashlight beam caught a black and white photo clipped to one report. Men in lab coats standing next to cages. Something large and blurry moved behind the bars. Before we could read more, our radios crackled to life. Beth! Daniel! Kyle's voice was tight with panic. Get back here now! Weather's turning bad. Outside, the temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees. Dark clouds rolled in from nowhere, and the wind howled through the trees. We ran back to camp, the folders tucked inside my jacket. Look at this, Meredith said when we arrived, holding out her camera with shaking hands. She'd taken a photo of the forest edge while we were gone. In the shadows between the trees, two eyes glowed like amber lamps, floating at a height no normal animal could reach. Where's Mike? I asked suddenly, noticing our missing team member. He was on first watch, Kyle said. He should be right over. A scream cut through the howling wind, a man's voice filled with terror, then silence. Mike! Daniel shouted, grabbing his rifle, but I caught his arm. Wait! From the darkness came a voice, Mike's voice, calling for help. But something was wrong with it, like someone trying to imitate human speech without knowing how. Don't go out there, James whispered, huddled by the fire. That's not Mike anymore. Morning revealed a thin trail of blood leading from our camp into the forest. My stomach knotted as I followed the droplets with my eyes, watching them disappear into the trees. We need to find Mike, Daniel said, checking his rifle for the third time. I nodded, studying the ground. These drag marks, whatever took him was big, and it wasn't trying to hide its trail, almost like it wanted us to follow. James refused to leave camp, and someone needed to stay with him anyway. Kyle volunteered, his face pale but determined. That left me, Daniel, and Meredith to follow the blood trail. It led us to the mouth of a cave hidden behind a tangle of dead trees. The entrance was tall and narrow, like a doorway cut into the mountain itself. "I know these caves," Daniel whispered. "Old limestone mines. They run for miles under the ridge." My flashlight beam caught something metal glinting just inside the entrance. An old mining cart, its wheels caked with rust. Beside it lay Mike's torn backpack. "We should go back for help," Meredith suggested, her voice barely audible. But we all knew the truth. Help was too far away, and Mike might not have that kind of time. The cave sloped downward, widening into tunnels braced with rotting wooden supports. Our flashlights cast long shadows that seemed to move when we weren't looking directly at them. In a large chamber, we found equipment that didn't belong in an old mine. Metal tables bolted to the floor, strange machines with dials and switches, cages big enough to hold large animals. "What is this place?" Meredith breathed, snapping photos. On a desk covered in dust, I found a logbook. The last entry was dated 1956. Vocal adaptation in Subject 7 exceeding expectations. Subject now able to mimic complex human speech patterns with 87% accuracy. A low growl echoed through the tunnels, making us freeze. "Did you hear that?" Daniel whispered. I nodded, raising my rifle. The sound came again, closer this time. But it wasn't just a growl, it was a voice, Mike's voice, calling from the darkness. "Help! Please!" We followed the sound deeper into the tunnel system. The air grew colder, heavy with the smell of wet fur and decay. That's when we saw it standing, in a side tunnel, a massive shape taller than any man. In the beam of my flashlight, I caught a glimpse of a long snout, amber eyes that reflected the light like mirrors, and hands that weren't hands at all, but something between paws and fingers. It held something that gleamed silver. A knife. Mike's hunting knife. "Run," I whispered, raising my rifle. The thing moved faster than I thought possible. It slammed into Kyle, sending him crashing against the wall before any of us could fire. Then it vanished back into the darkness, moving on all fours now, its claws scrabbling against stone. Kyle lay on the ground, blood seeping through his jacket from 4 deep claw marks across his chest. "We need to get him out of here," I said, already pulling Kyle to his feet. Behind us, echoing through the tunnels, came the sound of laughter. Human laughter, but wrong somehow, like someone learning how to make the sound for the first time. We ran, half carrying Kyle between us, the creature's howls chasing us all the way back to daylight. Back at camp, I cleaned Kyle's wounds while Daniel kept watch. The claw marks were deep, but had missed anything vital. He was lucky. "What the hell was that thing?" Meredith whispered, her hands still shaking as she helped me bandage Kyle's chest. I pulled out the folders we'd found in the mining office and spread them on the ground. The yellowed pages told a story none of us wanted to believe. "Project Cerberus," I read aloud. "Government experiments from the 1950s. They were trying to create some kind of super soldier using wolf DNA." Daniel leaned over my shoulder. "That's crazy. That kind of technology didn't exist back then." "Maybe not officially," I said, turning. Pages filled with notes about genetic splicing and vocal cord modifications. "But look at these dates. They were doing this for years before it all suddenly stopped." "Why did they stop?" Meredith asked. I flipped to the last report. "Subject escape. 3 researchers killed. Project terminated." The date matched what Kyle had told us about the missing research team. James had been listening from his spot by the fire. "His skin," he murmured, eyes distant. "Check his skin." I looked up. "What?" "Trevor. Before it took him, I saw marks, like bruises, but they moved. Slowly, James rolled up his sleeve. Dark purple marks like bruises spread across his forearm in strange patterns that didn't look random. "They weren't there yesterday," Daniel said, voice tight. From his cot, Kyle groaned and shifted. Something fell from his pocket, a silver, $1 old and tarnished. It landed on the ground next to James, who flinched away from it like it had burned him. "You okay?" I asked, noticing his reaction. James swallowed hard. Hurts when it's close. I picked up the coin, turning it over in my fingers. A crazy idea formed in my mind. Daniel, were there any mentions of weaknesses in those files? He shuffled through papers. Nothing specific, just notes about electromagnetic sensitivity. The creatures could somehow manipulate electromagnetic fields. That's why our equipment keeps failing. And silver is one of the most electrically conductive metals, I said slowly. I walked to my pack and pulled out my compass. The needle spun wildly, pointing in all directions before settling on a spot deep in the forest. Exactly where we'd heard the howling. It's creating some kind of electromagnetic distortion, I said. That's how it confuses its victims, makes them hear things that aren't there. So what's the plan? Daniel asked, checking his rifle again. I looked at the map of the mountain, the mining tunnels beneath it, and the territories marked by those strange claw symbols. First, we need weapons that will actually hurt these things, I said, holding up the silver dollar. And then we need to find out how many we're dealing with. Because I was starting to think we weren't hunting one monster, we were hunting a pack. Dawn broke cold and grey. We hadn't slept much, too busy turning silver coins and an old mining pick into weapons. Daniel had melted down Kyle's silver dollar and some old coins I had in my truck, using them to coat the tips of hunting arrows and knives. Will this really work? Meredith asked, watching me sharpen a silver-tipped hunting knife. I don't know, I admitted, but I'd rather try something than just wait to be picked off one by one. Kyle could barely stand, but he sat with the map of mining tunnels spread across his lap, marking possible entry points and bottlenecks. If these things have set up a den, it'll be here, he said, pointing to a large chamber deep in the mountain. These old ventilation shafts might give us a way in without being seen. I studied his plan. It was dangerous, insane, really, but it was all we had. Daniel, I need to talk to you, I said, nodding toward my truck. Once we were alone, I handed him my satellite phone, our last working piece of equipment. If I don't make it back, call this number, I said. It's my sister in Colorado. Tell her what happened. Daniel's face changed. He took my hand, surprising me. Beth, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice tight. I've wanted to say it for years, but the timing was never right. I looked at him, really looked, and saw what had been there all along. The way he'd always volunteered for searches I led. The coffee he'd bring to planning meetings. The quiet support when my last rescue went wrong. Dan, You don't have to say anything, he cut in quickly. I just couldn't go into those caves without you knowing. Before I could respond, Meredith called from the campsite, her voice urgent. Guys, you need to see this. She'd been developing photos from inside the cave. One showed a pile of what looked like white sticks half hidden in a dark corner. I enlarged it, she said, handing me another print. They're not sticks. They were bones, human bones, but not random. They were all the same type, carefully arranged. Finger bones, I said, feeling sick. They're all finger bones. It's collecting them, James whispered from his spot by the fire, like trophies. Looking closer at the photo, I noticed something else. Scratches in the cave wall behind the bone pile. Meredith had captured them perfectly. They weren't random marks. They were the same symbols we'd seen on the trees. I don't think we're dealing with just mindless animals, I said slowly. These things are organized. They have a language. And if the files are right about more than one test subject, escaping, Daniel didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. We weren't hunting one monster that had somehow survived for decades. We were hunting its children. Darkness fell too quickly. We left James and Kyle at camp, with strict instructions to stay inside the truck. Doors locked. No matter what they heard. Armed with silver-tipped weapons and headlamps, Daniel, Meredith, and I made our way to the old mine entrance. We carried an old piece of mining equipment Kyle had recognized from the photos, an ultrasonic drill used for detecting cracks in stone. If these things have sensitive hearing, I explained, this might disorient them enough for us to find. The missing hikers. I didn't say what we all knew. The hikers were probably already dead. The mine entrance loomed before us, a black mouth in the mountainside. The air flowing out was cold and carried that same wet dog smell. Stronger now. Remember, the plan, I whispered. We set up the drill at the first junction, turn it on and wait. When they come to investigate, we follow their tracks back to their den. Daniel nodded, checking his rifle one last time. And if they don't take the bait? I tightened my grip on my silver-tipped hunting knife. Then we fight our way out. We moved into the tunnel, our headlamps cutting small circles of light in the darkness. Every sound echoed, our breathing, our footsteps, the soft clink of equipment. I felt exposed, vulnerable. At the first junction, Daniel set up the drill, aiming it down the tunnel that led deeper into the mountain. I flipped the switch. A high-pitched whine filled the air, just at the edge of human hearing. We backed into a side passage to wait. Minutes. Ticked by. Nothing. Maybe they're not, Meredith began. A howl cut through the darkness, followed by another, then another. Not from down the tunnel where we'd aimed the drill, but from behind us, from the entrance. It's a trap, I breathed, spinning around. Yellow eyes glowed in the darkness. Not one pair, but many, surrounding us on all sides. They'd been waiting. "Run!" I shouted, firing my rifle at the nearest pair of eyes. Something huge and dark leaped from the shadows. Daniel fired, and the creature yelped, but two more took its place. We ran deeper into the mines, the sounds of claws on stone just behind us. At a fork in the tunnel, something grabbed Meredith's pack, yanking her backward. I slashed with my knife, catching fur and flesh. A high-pitched scream echoed through the tunnel, and the creature retreated. "This way!" I yelled, pulling Meredith to her feet. We sprinted down the left-hand tunnel, but the path narrowed, forcing us into single file. Daniel took the lead, then Meredith, with me bringing up the rear. A massive shape dropped from the ceiling, landing between me and the others. I fired my last bullet point-blank into its chest. It staggered but didn't fall. "Beth!" Daniel shouted, turning back for me. "Go!" I screamed. "I'll find another way!" The tunnel ahead of me was blocked by the wounded creature. I had no choice but to double back, taking a different route. I ran blindly through the darkness, my headlamp the only light. Behind me, I heard Daniel's voice calling my name, then a scream that cut off suddenly. When I paused to catch my breath, ears straining for sounds of pursuit, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Daniel's voice calling for help, but wrong somehow, flat, mechanical, like a recording played through broken speakers. Then Meredith's voice joined in, calling my name over and over. But I had just seen Meredith running with Daniel down a different tunnel. The voices were coming from everywhere at once, and I was alone in the dark. I spent hours creeping through the dark tunnels, knife in hand, jumping at every shadow. My headlamp was dying, the beam growing weaker with each passing minute. I had to find Daniel and Meredith. Had to believe they were still alive. A strange smell led me deeper into the mountain. Not just the wet dog smell, but something else. Something chemical. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber that must have once been the main mining area. My fading light revealed rusty equipment, collapsed scaffolding, and something else, cages. Large metal cages like the ones from the old photographs. And bones. So many bones scattered across the stone floor. In the center of the chamber stood metal tables with leather straps, surgical equipment rusted with age and dark stains, and newer things, personal items from hikers, backpacks, cameras, watches, all arranged carefully like museum displays. A groan from the far corner made me spin around, knife raised. Meredith. She was tied to a support beam, blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead, but alive. "Beth," she whispered as I cut her free. "They took Daniel, the big one. It spoke, actually spoke." "Where?" I demanded, helping her to her feet. She pointed toward a tunnel at the back of the chamber. "They dragged him that way. There's..." There's a nest! More of them! I handed Meredith my spare knife. Can you walk? She nodded, though her legs shook. Beth, I saw what they're doing. The marks on James's skin. It's changing him. Those things, they were human once. My blood went cold. What? The experiments didn't just create monsters. They're infectious. Their bites, their scratches, it spreads. I thought of Kyle's wounds, the strange marks on James's arm. We need to end this, I said. All of it. In my pack, I still had something I hadn't told the others about. Blasting caps and a small amount of explosive. Standard equipment for search and rescue in avalanche country. Enough to bring down a section of the mine. We moved toward the back tunnel, staying close to the wall. The passage twisted downward, the air growing warmer, damper. It opened into another chamber, smaller but higher ceilinged. And there, hanging from the ceiling, were dark shapes, wrapped in what looked like cocoons, made of cloth and some sticky substance. The missing hikers, Meredith whispered. One of the cocoons moved. Something was still alive inside. Before we could reach them, a low growl echoed through the chamber. I turned slowly. The largest dogman I'd seen yet stood blocking our exit. It was nearly 8 feet tall, its amber eyes fixed on us with terrifying intelligence. Behind it, 2 smaller creatures crouched, ready to spring. And at its feet lay Daniel, unconscious but breathing. The big one took a step forward, and then it did something I wasn't prepared for. It spoke. Why, come here. The words were rough, forced through a throat not meant for human speech. Our home. I raised my knife, trying to keep my hand steady. You took our friends. The creature tilted its head. Make more like us. Where did you come from? I asked, buying time as I slowly reached into my pack for the explosives. Men made us, cut us, changed us. It bared its teeth in what might have been a smile. Now we change others. I looked at the cocoons hanging from the ceiling, understanding dawning. They weren't killing their victims. They were converting them. The explosion still rings in my ears, even days later. I remember Meredith shoving me toward the tunnel as the ceiling began to crumble. I remember reaching for Daniel, dragging him towards safety as tons of rock crashed down behind us. I remember Meredith's scream as the Alpha Dogman launched itself. At her, and then darkness. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. Frostbite had claimed 3 of my fingers on my right hand. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive after spending 2 nights on the mountain in a snowstorm. They found me half a mile from the ranger station, delirious with cold and blood loss. I was alone. No one believes my story. Of course they don't. They think I hallucinated everything after getting separated from my team in the blizzard that hit suddenly that night. They say exposure and trauma can make you see things that aren't there. The official report states that Daniel Hoffman, Meredith Wilson, Kyle Jennings, and James Porter all died in a tragic accident during a routine search and rescue operation. The missing hikers are still classified as missing. The Park Service sent a team to investigate the mine entrance I described, but they found nothing. Just an old, collapsed shaft, too dangerous to explore. They said the area had been unstable for years. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was all in my head. Except for 3 things. First, the folders from the mining office disappeared from my backpack while I was unconscious. Second, I sometimes catch glimpses of strange marks under my skin when I wake up in the morning. Dark patterns that fade within minutes, like the ones James showed me. And third, sometimes at night, I hear voices outside my window. Voices that sound almost human, but not quite. Voices that call my name in perfect imitations of Daniel and Meredith. I bought silver bullets last week. I keep them next to my bed along with my old rifle. This morning, I found scratches on my front door, 3 parallel lines too high for any normal animal to reach. And below them, Carved into the wood with something sharp was a symbol like the ones we found on the trees. They know where I live. They know I survived. I've started researching other incidents, other mountains with stories of strange creatures and missing hikers. There's a pattern emerging. Devil's Backbone isn't the only place these things exist. The dogmen are spreading. Tonight, I'm leaving this town, heading west toward another mountain range with similar stories. I have to find out how far this goes, how many nests exist, because if I don't stop them, no one will. And that sound you just heard outside your window, that voice calling your name that sounds just like someone you love, don't answer it. Don't even look. Just remember, they can sound like anyone they've heard, and now they've heard you too. The dead coyote was a bad sign. Its eyes were missing, and its body was twisted in a way that wasn't natural. I've spent 45 years in these canyons, and I know when something isn't right. This wasn't a normal animal death. This was a warning. My name is Nathan Redfeather. I'm a Navajo guide who knows these northern Arizona canyons better than I know the lines on my own palm. After Vietnam, I came back to the old ways, trying to forget what I'd seen and done. The desert has a way of washing. You're clean if you let it. But sometimes, things hide in these ancient places that should stay buried. Mr. Redfeather, we're ready to move out whenever you are, called Dr. Julia Morrison from our base camp. She was smart. An archaeoastronomer, she called herself. She studied how ancient people used the stars. Her dark hair was always tied back, and she had kind eyes that noticed details others missed. I nodded and shouldered my pack. Just checking the trail ahead. Let's go. I didn't want this job. 3 scientists wanting to see some meteor shower from Whispering Shadows Canyon. The place had bad stories, old stories, but the money was good and winter would come soon enough. Professor Whitmore, the oldest of the group, was already complaining about the heat. His fancy hat and clean boots told me everything, a man who studied the land without respecting it. Nathan, how much further to the observation site? He called. These instruments aren't getting any lighter. 2 hours if we keep a good pace, I answered, feeling the weight of my medicine pouch against my chest. I'd added extra protective herbs that morning. Couldn't say why exactly. The youngest scientist, David Tolman, was different. He moved carefully, watched where he stepped. He studied rocks and meteorites and actually listened when I spoke. I heard stories about this canyon having unusual magnetic properties, David said, walking beside me. Is that true? I studied his. He faced before answering. The old people say the shadows here sometimes move on their own. He laughed, thinking I was telling a campfire story. I wasn't. The canyon walls rose up around us like ancient guardians, red rock carved by wind and time, into shapes that sometimes looked like faces, if you glanced too quickly. The summer heat pressed down, making the air shimmer. My grandfather would never have entered this place during a celestial event. The barrier between worlds grows thin when the sky changes. By midday, we reached the Pueblo ruins, where Whitmore wanted to set up camp. The old stone walls still stood, creating rooms that had been empty for 800 years, or should have been empty. Perfect, Whitmore exclaimed, dropping his pack. These walls will provide excellent shelter and backdrop for our observations. I noticed right away what the scientists missed. The small drawings near the ground level of the ruins, warning symbols, stick figures with elongated limbs, spiral patterns that represented imprisonment. My fingers touched my grandfather's silver, knife at my belt. We should camp further down, I said quietly. Nonsense. Whitmore waved his hand. This is the precise location for viewing the meteor shower at its peak. The ancient peoples knew it too. That's why they built here. Julia was setting up her equipment, but I caught her watching me. Is something wrong, Nathan? I considered telling them. About the symbols. About why my people avoided this canyon during celestial events. About the stories of the skin thief that my grandmother had whispered to me as a child. Instead, I said, Storm coming soon. Feel it in the air. As we unpacked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The canyon was silent, too silent. No birds, no insects buzzing, just the wind that sometimes sounded like whispers between the rocks. "It's going to be a spectacular show tonight," Julia said excitedly. "This meteor shower only happens once. A century." I nodded but kept my thoughts to myself. Some doors should stay closed. Some visitors are not welcome. That night, as the scientists prepared their instruments, I quietly made a small, protective circle around our camp, just in case. I've never seen stars fall like they did that night. They streaked across the sky like someone had torn holes in a black cloth. The scientists were excited, pointing and taking pictures, but something felt wrong to me. The air was too cold for a summer night, making our breath fog in front of our faces. "This is incredible," Julia exclaimed, her eyes fixed on the sky. "The intensity is far beyond what we predicted." David was busy with some machine that beeped and showed numbers. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. I've never seen anything like this." I sat a little away from them, feeling the cold seep through my jacket. In all my years in these canyons, I'd never felt a chill like this. In summer, it was the kind of cold that comes from something unnatural. That's when it happened. One meteor, brighter than all the others, came screaming down right toward us. For a second, I thought we were done for. "Look at that," Whitmore shouted, pointing. The meteor hit the canyon wall about half a mile from us. The ground shook like a small earthquake, and a cloud of dust rose up. Even from where we sat, we heard the crack of stone breaking apart. "We have to check it out." David was already grabbing his pack and flashlight. "In the morning," I said, firmly. No one should be climbing these walls in the dark. But Whitmore wouldn't hear it. "Nonsense. This is precisely what we came for. A fresh meteorite impact. We're going now." I didn't like it, but I couldn't let them go alone. We followed the glowing trail of dust to where the meteor had hit. The impact had cracked open part of the canyon wall, revealing a small cave entrance that had been sealed up. Around the entrance were more of those warning symbols, clearer now and impossible to miss. "Look at these markings," Julia said, shining her light on them. "They're similar to protective symbols found at other sites, but more urgent somehow. Superstitious." "Nonsense," Whitmore muttered, already pushing toward the cave entrance. I put my hand on his shoulder. "We shouldn't go in there." "Why not?" he challenged. "These are warning signs. My people put them here for a reason." He shrugged off my hand. "Your people may have had their reasons, but we're scientists. That meteorite could be inside." Before I could stop him, he shined his light into the cave. The beam didn't seem to penetrate very far, like the darkness was swallowing it up. That's when we heard it, a strange sound from deeper in the canyon. Like a coyote, but wrong somehow, too human. The sound made the hair on my arms stand up. "What was that?" Julia whispered. "Just an animal," Whitmore said, but he stepped back from the cave entrance. I noticed something else too. All around us, little creatures were moving, snakes slithering away from the cave, scorpions scuttling across rocks faster than normal. A pack of coyotes appeared on the ridge above us, watching with glinting eyes, their bodies tense. "The animals are spooked," I said quietly. "We should go back to camp." As we walked back, I fell behind a bit. Without the others noticing, I took some sacred herbs from my medicine pouch and sprinkled them in a line across the path. I whispered the protection prayer my grandfather taught me. The scientists would think it was just superstition, but I knew better. When we got back to camp, no one felt like sleeping. The meteor shower continued above us, beautiful but somehow threatening now. I made coffee and kept watch, while the others talked excitedly about what we might find in the morning. Something had changed in the canyon. I could feel it in the air, in the unnatural silence broken only by occasional animal cries that sounded too desperate. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time was now awake, and it was watching us. I woke up before everyone else. The sun wasn't even up yet, but I couldn't sleep anymore. Something felt off. I checked my knife and medicine pouch, then walked the edges of our camp. The protection herbs I'd put down last night were gone. Not blown away by wind, just gone, like something had taken them. When the others finally woke up, they were eager to explore the cave. I wanted to tell them to pack up and leave, but I knew they wouldn't listen. "Nathan, you look tired," Julia said, handing me a cup of coffee. "Everything okay?" "Just keeping watch," I said, not wanting to worry her yet. "Dessert. Nights can be dangerous." Whitmore was already packing his gear. "Let's get moving." That meteorite could be groundbreaking research. We hiked back to the impact site as the morning sun heated up the canyon. The cave entrance looked different in daylight. Darker somehow, like a mouth waiting to swallow us. The warning symbols seemed to stand out more clearly. "These symbols," Julia said, tracing them with her finger but not touching them. "They show a figure that looks partly human, partly something else." "Skin thief," I said, before I could stop myself. "What's that?" David asked, looking up from his instruments. "Old stories about a witch who could steal the skin of animals and people. Bad medicine." "Fascinating folklore," Whitmore said, not really listening. He was more interested in the strange readings from David's equipment. "These radiation levels don't make sense," David said, frowning at his machine. "It's not dangerous, but it's unusual. Not like any meteorite I've studied." I stayed at the cave entrance while they went in a short way. The darkness seemed to push against their flashlight beams. After a few minutes, Julia called out excitedly, "Nathan, you need to see this!" Reluctantly, I stepped into the cave. The air was cool but dry, and something about it made my skin crawl. About 20 feet in, the narrow passage opened into a small chamber. On the walls were paintings, hundreds of them, better preserved than any I'd seen before. "Look," Julia pointed, "they're telling a story." I could see it clearly. The paintings showed people trapping something that looked almost human, but wrong. Too tall, with long limbs and yellow eyes. They showed meteors falling, and the creature emerging from where they struck. Then people fighting it, some being taken over by it. The final images showed the creature being trapped in the earth, with a circle of what looked like iron from the sky. "Meteorite iron," David said, looking closely. "The ancient people used meteoric iron to trap whatever this thing was." "Nonsense," Whitmore said, but he didn't sound convinced anymore. "Just primitive explanations for natural events." "There's something else," Julia said, pointing to markings at the bottom of the wall. "These are astronomical calculations. They mark the 100-year cycle of this meteor shower." A chill ran down my spine. "The creature is trapped until the meteors return," I said. "That's what the story says." Whitmore scoffed, but I noticed he backed toward the entrance. "Let's get samples from the impact site," he said. Outside, David found fragments of the meteorite scattered around. As he picked one up, I saw him wince. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just, it's warm, and it seems to pulse? That can't be right." As David collected samples, I climbed up to get a better view of the canyon. That's when I saw it, a figure standing on a ridge at least 300 feet up a sheer cliff face. No way a person could get up there without climbing gear. "Hey," I called out. The figure didn't move, just watched. Then, as I blinked against the sun, it was gone. When I told the others, Whitmore dismissed it as a trick of light. Julia looked worried, though, and David kept glancing up at the ridges as we headed back to camp. That afternoon, the wind picked up, blowing dust through the canyon. It swirled in strange patterns, sometimes looking like a tall, thin figure before breaking apart. "Storm coming?" David asked me. I shook my head. No rain in that wind, just dust. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the ruins, I noticed tracks around our camp. Coyote prints that stopped suddenly, as if the animal had vanished mid-step. And one set that started as coyote, but slowly changed shape to look almost human. I didn't point these out to the others, not yet, but I quietly placed my silver knife where I could grab it quickly and added more protection herbs to my pouch. Something was testing us, watching how we reacted, learning about us, and night was coming again. When darkness fell, none of us felt like sleeping. We sat around the campfire, the flames casting strange shadows on the ancient Pueblo walls. David kept studying his meteorite samples, his face looking more worried with each test. I need to talk to my cousin Maria, I said, stepping away from the fire. She knows the old stories better than anyone. I used our satellite radio to call Maria Tsosi. She was my father's cousin, and at 72, she remembered what the elders had taught about this place. When she finally answered, her voice crackled through the static. Nathan, why are you calling so late? I'm in Whispering Shadows Canyon, I said quietly, with scientists studying the meteor shower. There was a long silence before she spoke again. You shouldn't be there. Not during the 100-year skyfall. I know that now. We found a cave opened by a meteorite. It has paintings inside. Listen carefully. Maria's voice grew serious. The old stories say a skin thief was trapped there long ago. It can take the shape of animals or people after it. Empties them. My hand tightened on the radio. What else? It tests its victims first, learns their fears, creates dust storms and makes people see things. If it's free, you'll know because animals will act strange and you'll feel watched. I thought about the coyote tracks changing to human prints, the figure on the impossible ridge. How do we stop it? Silver hurts it, running water traps it, and it can only take one body at a time. But Nathan, her voice dropped even lower, if it's already awake, you need to leave. Now, these scientists won't go. They think it's just stories. Then watch for signs. Someone acting strange, missing time, not casting shadows, right? After I hung up, I rejoined the others. They had gone quiet, all staring into the fire. Bad dreams, Julia finally said. I had them during my nap earlier. Did anyone else? David nodded slowly. I dreamed something was chasing me through the canyon, but I couldn't see it, just heard it breathing behind me. I had the same dream, Whitmore admitted, looking shaken for the first time. I felt my skin go cold. Shared nightmares were another sign. What did Maria say? Julia asked me. I was about to answer when David suddenly stood up. Something's happening to the samples. The meteorite fragments he'd collected were giving off. A faint glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. As we watched, one of the pieces seemed to melt slightly, forming a shape that looked almost like a tiny face before hardening again. That's not scientifically possible, Whitmore whispered. A sound from beyond our camp made us all turn. I grabbed my flashlight and knife, moving cautiously toward the noise. Just past the edge of our camp, I found something that made my stomach turn. 3 dead rabbits laid out in a perfect triangle, their bodies twisted unnaturally. Inside the triangle was a dead snake, its body forming a symbol I recognized from the cave paintings. Did an animal do this? Julia asked, her voice shaking. I shook my head. No animal arranges its kills like this. As I said it, I noticed David taking pictures of something on the canyon wall. There's someone out there, he said, showing us his camera. In the photo, barely visible against the rocks, was a figure. It looked human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, limbs too long, and its eyes caught the flash, glowing yellow like an animal's. Could be a reflection, Whitmore said, but his voice had no conviction. We decided to take turns keeping watch that night. During my shift, I noticed the stars seemed dimmer, like something was hanging in the air between us and the sky. The temperature dropped so low I could see my breath, even though it was summer in the desert. When Julia took over watch from me, she looked pale. Nathan, she whispered, I keep hearing someone calling my name. It sounds like my mother's voice, but she's been dead for 10 years. I gave her my silver knife. Hold this. If you see anything strange, wake us all up. As I tried to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt since the war. The absolute certainty of being hunted. Something was watching us, learning our habits, finding our weaknesses. And tomorrow I knew it would make its move. Morning came with a strange fog hanging in the canyon, which made no sense in the desert. The air felt heavy, like before a thunderstorm. None of us had slept well. David kept checking his meteorite samples, which had grown warmer overnight. I noticed Whitmore standing apart from us, staring at the cave in the distance. Something about the way he stood seemed off, too still, like he wasn't blinking enough. "Professor," I called, "you okay?" He turned slowly. "Fine. Just thinking we should go back to the cave today." His voice sounded normal, but his eyes didn't quite focus on me. I made a mental note to watch him carefully. After breakfast, Julia pulled me aside. "Nathan, something's wrong with Whitmore. He was outside the camp last night during my watch. When I asked where he was going, he said he was just stretching his legs, but he was walking toward the cave." I nodded. "Stay close to David today. Don't be alone with Whitmore." As we hiked back to the cave, I fell into step beside the professor. "How did you sleep?" I asked casually. "Well enough," he answered, but his movements were stiff, mechanical. When we reached the cave, David set up more equipment while Julia copied down the wall paintings. I stood near Whitmore watching him. When he thought no one was looking, he picked up one of the meteorite fragments and slipped it into his pocket. "Find something interesting?" I asked. He startled. "Just collecting samples." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my grandfather's silver knife, pretending to clean my fingernails with it. "Mind if I see that rock?" His eyes fixed on the silver blade, and for just a second, his face changed. A ripple passing over it like heat waves. "On desert sand." He took a step back. "I need to check something outside," he said quickly and walked away. Now I was sure. Whatever was in the professor wasn't completely him anymore. I quietly told Julia and David what I'd seen. David looked scared, but Julia just nodded, like this confirmed something she had suspected. "I found more paintings deeper in the cave," she said. "They show how to identify when the skin thief has taken someone. They cast wrong shadows sometimes, and they can't touch silver, or cross running water in their stolen form," I added, remembering Maria's warning. David's voice shook slightly. "So you're saying Professor Whitmore is possessed?" Before I could answer, we heard Whitmore calling from outside. "You all need to see this." We found him standing near a small clearing. The ground was covered with strange marks, like something had been dragged in a spiral pattern. "Animal tracks," Whitmore said, but he was standing too far from us. His hands hidden in his pockets. I moved toward him slowly, silver knife now in my palm, but hidden along my arm. "What kind of animal, Professor?" He shrugged. "Hard to say." I took another step. "Funny you being an archaeologist and all. I thought you didn't care much about animal signs." His eyes narrowed, and that's when I saw it. His shadow on the ground behind him was wrong. It had too many limbs. I lunged forward suddenly, the silver knife extended. "Show yourself." Whitmore's face contorted, stretching in ways a human face shouldn't move. His mouth opened too wide, and a sound came out that wasn't human. A high, keening wail that made my ears hurt. "Run!" I shouted to the others. Julia and David bolted toward the camp, but I kept my eyes on Whitmore, whose body was now twitching and jerking. His fingers lengthened, the joints bending backward. "I know what you are," I said, holding the knife steady. "Skin thief." The thing wearing Whitmore smiled, its teeth suddenly too sharp. "How long has it been since someone spoke?" "My name, Tracker?" The voice was Whitmore's, but layered with something ancient and dry, like wind through dead branches. "Leave him," I demanded. It laughed. "This shell serves me for now, but there are others." I slashed forward with the silver knife, catching it across the arm. The wound sizzled, and the creature hissed in pain. It backed away, then suddenly turned, and ran, moving too fast, its limbs bending at impossible angles as it disappeared into the rocks. I chased it for a short distance, but it knew the canyon better than I did, vanishing into shadows that seemed darker than they should be. When I returned to camp, Julia and David were frantically packing their gear. "We need to leave now," David was saying. "We can't," I told them. "It will follow us, and Whitmore is still in there somewhere." "What do we do?" Julia asked. I emptied my medicine pouch on the ground. "First, we protect ourselves. Then we figure out how to trap it again." As the sun began to set, we performed the protection rituals I had learned as a child. I didn't know if they would be enough, but they were all we had. The thing wearing Whitmore was out there, watching us, planning. And night was coming again. Night fell faster than it should have. The shadows in the canyon seemed to stretch and reach toward our camp like fingers. We sat close together near the fire, weapons ready. I had given my silver knife to Julia and pulled out another smaller one I kept in my boot. "We need to understand what we're fighting," I said, unfolding an old piece of paper. "These are notes my grandfather made about the skin thief legends." David's hands shook as he held his flashlight. "I still can't believe this is happening. There has to be a scientific explanation. Science or not, you saw what happened to Whitmore." Julia said quietly, "That wasn't human." I spread the paper on the ground between us. According to the old stories, the skin thief was once a witch who did a forbidden ritual during a meteor shower. The meteors have special power. They're made of sky iron that can either trap the creature or make it stronger. "The meteorite. Samples," David said suddenly. "They've been getting warmer, and last night I saw one of them move on its own, just a little." Julia looked at the canyon walls surrounding us. "The ancient paintings show how the people trapped it before. They used the meteorite iron to make a circle, then used special words to bind it inside. My notes say it can only possess one person at a time," I added. "So at least we know Whitmore is the only one we need to worry about right now." "How do we know when it's nearby?" David asked. "Animals act strange. The air gets cold, and it likes to play tricks. Make you hear things, see things that remind you of your fears." Just then, we heard a voice calling from the darkness beyond. "Our camp, help me, please." It was Whitmore's voice, but normal now, scared. "It's letting me go, but I'm hurt." David started to stand, but I grabbed his arm. "Don't, it's a trick." "But what if it's really him?" David whispered. The voice called, again, sounding more desperate. "Please, I got away, but I can't walk." "It's testing us," I said firmly, "seeing if we'll separate." Julia pointed to something at the edge of our firelight. "Look at the ground." I saw it too, a small line of dust moving across the dirt by itself, forming shapes that looked like words for a moment before the wind scattered them. "It's trying to communicate," Julia said. I shook my head. "It's trying to distract us." We stayed close, backs to each other. The calling continued for an hour, sometimes sounding like Whitmore, sometimes like other voices, people we knew, family members. I heard my mother's voice at one point, even though she'd been dead for 20 years. Around midnight, the radio crackled to life by itself. Through bursts of static, we heard Maria's voice. "Nathan, are you there? Something's wrong. I can feel it." I grabbed the radio. "Maria, we found it, the skin thief. It's taken Whitmore." Her voice came through broken with static. "Listen carefully. The old stories, meteorite power, astronomical alignment, makes it stronger." "What did she say?" David asked as the radio went dead. Julia's eyes widened. "The astronomical alignment. That's why it's happening now. The meteor shower isn't just breaking it free, it's making it more powerful." "That explains why it's getting stronger," I said, "and why the meteorite fragments are reacting." As we talked, the temperature around us plummeted, our breath clouded in front of our faces. The fire dimmed, though there was no wind. "It's here," I whispered. "We could see it now. A tall, thin shadow moving just beyond the firelight. Not quite Whitmore anymore. Its limbs were too long, its movements jerky like a puppet. Silver hurts it, I reminded them, and it can't cross. Running water. There's no running water for miles, David said, his voice cracking. Then we use what we have, I said, pulling out my canteen. I poured the water in a thin line around our small circle, completing it with a few drops of my blood, and a whispered prayer. The shadow creature paced back and forth, testing the boundaries of our protection. It made a sound like dry leaves rustling. The binding ritual, Julia said suddenly. I can translate the words from the cave paintings, but we'd need meteorite fragments to make the circle. I have some samples, David said, but not enough for a full circle. We need to find more, I said, and we need to get it into a place where it can be trapped again. The creature let out a sound, half laugh, half screech, and then retreated into the darkness. But I knew it wasn't giving up. It was planning something worse. As dawn approached, we finally let ourselves rest a little. We had learned the rules of this fight, but knowledge wasn't enough. We needed a plan, and we needed to act fast, because with each passing hour, the thing that used to be Professor Whitmore was becoming less human and more monster, and soon it might be powerful enough to take more than one of us at a time. Morning light filled the canyon, but it didn't feel as safe as it should have. The shadows seemed darker than normal, like they were hiding things. We took turns sleeping for a few hours, while the others kept watch. When we were all awake, we gathered around to make a plan. Our food was running low, and we all looked tired and scared. We need to trap it, I said, drawing a map of the canyon in the dirt. The best place would be back at the cave where it was sealed before. Julia nodded. I've been studying the cave paintings. The ancient people created a circle with the meteorite iron, then used specific chants to bind the creature inside. I can transcribe the chants, she continued, showing us her notebook full of copied symbols. They're similar to some Navajo. Protection prayers, but older. David emptied his pack, showing us the meteorite fragments he'd collected. We don't have enough to make a complete circle. We need to find more. I think I know where to look, I said. The paintings showed other impact sites from previous meteor showers. There should be more fragments there. While Julia worked on translating the binding words, David and I prepared to search for more meteorite pieces. We made simple weapons, my silver knife for me and for David, a knife with a meteorite fragment attached to the handle. Silver weakens it, I explained, and its own meteorite iron can hurt it too, like fighting fire with fire. What about Whitmore? David asked quietly. Can we save him? I didn't want to give false hope. I don't know. The stories don't say much about what happens to the people it takes. Julia looked up from her notes. According to this, if we bind it soon enough, the host might survive. But the longer it stays in him, the less of him will be left. We needed to protect the camp, while David and I searched for more meteorite fragments. Julia took my medicine pouch and made a circle of protection around our site, using salt, silver coins, and special herbs. This will keep you safe until we get back, I told her. Don't break the circle for anyone, no matter what you hear or see. What if the skinwalker tries to trick me by looking like you? She asked. Smart question. We need a password, I said. Something only the three of us would know. We agreed on a word, Starfall, that we would say when returning to camp. Anyone who didn't know the password wasn't really us. Before leaving, I showed Julia how to use the radio to contact Maria if things got bad. She knows the old ways better than I do. David and I headed out, following my map to the places where meteorites might have hit in the past. The canyon was eerily quiet. No birds singing, no lizards darting across rocks. Everything was hiding. Feels like the whole canyon is holding its breath, David said, looking around nervously. We found the first old impact site about a mile from camp. The ground was scorched in a circle, with strange glass-like rocks scattered around. David used his equipment to test them. These are definitely meteorite fragments, he confirmed. Old ones, maybe from the shower 100 years ago. We collected as many as we could find, storing them in a leather pouch I had brought. The strange thing was, even these old fragments felt warm to the touch, like they were waking up because of the new meteor shower. At the second site we found more fragments, but also something disturbing. Animal footprints that started as deer. Tracks then morphed into something else halfway through, and nearby, scratched into a rock, was a symbol that looked like a warning. "It's watching us," I said quietly. "It knows what we're doing." "How can we fight something like this?" David asked, his voice shaking. "With the oldest weapons, knowledge and belief," I answered. "My grandfather used to say that monsters only have the power that fear gives them." As we collected the last fragments, a dust devil, a small whirlwind of sand, formed nearby. It moved toward us, growing bigger until it was taller than a man. Inside the swirling dust, I could almost see a face forming. "Don't run," I whispered to David. "Stand your ground." I took out my silver knife and held it toward the dust devil. "We know what you are," I called out, "and we know how to send you back." The dust swirled faster, making a sound like angry whispers, then suddenly collapsed and blew away. But it had left something behind, a dead rabbit arranged in a specific pattern, its blood-forming symbols on the rock. "What does that mean?" David asked. "It's a threat," I said, "but also a sign that it's worried. It wouldn't bother trying to scare us if it wasn't afraid of what we're planning." By the time we headed back to camp, the sun was getting low. We had enough meteorite fragments now, but time was running out. Tonight would be the peak of the meteor shower, when the creature would be at its strongest. As we approached our camp, I saw Julia standing outside the protection circle, waving to us. "We found more fragments," David called out, starting to run toward her. I grabbed his arm. "Wait, the password." We watched as Julia's face changed from welcoming to confused. "What password?" she asked, and that's when I knew we were in trouble. "That's not Julia," I whispered to David, keeping my eyes on the figure by our camp. "Stay behind me." "Where's the real Julia then?" David's voice cracked with fear. I pulled out my silver knife, holding it low by my side. "Starfall," I called, out to the fake Julia. Her face twitched strangely, like something underneath was trying to get out. "What?" "The password is Starfall," I said, moving closer. "If you were really Julia, you'd know that." The thing that looked like Julia tilted its head at an unnatural angle. Then its mouth stretched into a smile that was too wide, with too many teeth. "Very clever, Tracker," it said, its voice changing from Julia's to something ancient and dry. "But while you were gathering pretty rocks, I was busy." It stepped aside, revealing the real Julia tied to one of the Pueblo walls behind her. She was unconscious, but breathing. "Let her go," I demanded, raising my knife. The fake Julia laughed, and its face rippled, features melting and reforming into Whitmore's. But not completely Whitmore anymore. His skin was stretched too tight, eyes sunken and yellow. "The woman tried to stop me," it said through Whitmore's mouth. "She's stronger than she looks. Had to knock her out." David moved next to me, his hand shaking as he held his own knife. "What did you do to Professor Whitmore?" The thing shrugged Whitmore's shoulders. "He's still in here screaming, getting quieter though." A dust storm suddenly kicked up around us, swirling faster and faster until I could barely see. The wind howled with voices, whispers, screams, words in languages I didn't understand. "Get to Julia," I shouted to David over the wind. "I'll hold it off." I lunged at the creature with my silver knife, but it moved inhumanly fast, dodging to the side. Its arms stretched out, longer than a human arm should be, and knocked me backward. Through the swirling dust, I saw David trying to reach Julia. The creature saw him too and made a gesture with its hand. The ground under David's feet cracked and shifted, making him stumble. I got to my feet and circled around, trying to flank the skinwalker. It kept its yellow eyes on me, its head turning too far to track my movements. "You'll make a better shell," Then this old man, it hissed. Strong, connected to the old ways. You're not taking me, I growled, slashing with the knife again. This time I connected, cutting across its arm. The wound sizzled where silver touched it, and the creature shrieked, a sound that made my ears ring. With the skinwalker distracted by pain, David managed to reach Julia and started untying her. She was waking up, dazed and confused. The creature noticed and let out another shriek. The dust storm intensified, and suddenly I couldn't see anything. I heard David yell in pain, then silence. When the dust settled, both David and Julia were on the ground. The skinwalker stood over them, blood dripping from its 2 long fingers. "No!" I shouted. "They're alive!" it said, smiling with too many teeth. "For now, I need them that way!" The creature moved toward our supplies and picked up the pouch of meteorite fragments. Looking for these? With a casual gesture, it tossed the pouch into a deep crevice in the canyon wall, far out of reach. "No circle of iron tonight," it mocked. "No binding ritual." I felt a cold despair settling in my chest. Our plan was falling apart, but then I remembered something. David had kept some fragments in his pocket as backups. I needed to distract the skinwalker. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, slowly moving to position myself between it and my friends. "Why not just kill us?" The creature's yellow eyes gleamed in the fading light. "Kill you? No, no, I need you, all of you. It's been so long since I had company." Its voice changed, becoming almost sad. "Do you know what it's like to be trapped? For 100 years, alone in the dark?" I didn't answer, just kept moving slowly. "I was human once," it continued. "Before the ritual, before the sky iron burned me." It was lying, trying to make me feel sympathy. The legends were clear. The skinwalker had never been human, not really. It had always been something else wearing human skin. I reached David and checked his pulse. Still alive, just knocked out. Julia was stirring, her eyes fluttering open. "Stay down," I whispered. "When I say run, get to the cave." The skinwalker was still talking, enjoying the sound of its own voice. It hadn't noticed Julia was awake. Night had fallen completely now, and above us, the meteor shower was starting again, more intense than before. "Can you feel it?" the creature asked, looking up at the sky. "The power? Tonight I'll be free. Forever." As if answering, a particularly bright meteor streaked overhead, lighting up the canyon like daylight for a moment. In that flash, I saw the skinwalker's true form beneath Whitmore's skin, something tall and twisted, with too many joints and yellow eyes that never blinked. The sight of it froze my blood, but I couldn't give in to fear now. "Now!" I shouted. To Julia, "Run!" She scrambled up, helping me pull David to his feet. The skinwalker roared and lunged toward us, but I threw my entire canteen of water at it. The water hit it in the face, and for a crucial second it couldn't move, trapped by the running liquid. We ran, half carrying David between us. Behind us, the skinwalker let out a howl of rage that echoed through the entire canyon. The sound chased us as we fled toward the cave. Our only hope now to somehow complete the binding ritual before it caught up. But I knew, deep down, our plan had failed. We were running out of time, out of resources and out of luck, and the night was just beginning. We reached the cave just before dawn, exhausted and terrified. David was finally fully awake, but had a nasty cut on his head. Julia was limping, her ankle twisted from our desperate run through the darkness. I had lost my main silver knife in the fight, left with only the small backup one. "We need to seal ourselves in," I gasped, as we stumbled into the cave chamber with the ancient paintings. "How?" Julia asked. "It's stronger than all of us combined." David reached into his pocket with shaking hands. "I still have 3 meteorite fragments, not enough for a circle, but something." I looked around the cave desperately. The paintings showed the ancient people trapping the skinwalker with a complete circle of meteorite iron. We didn't have enough for that. Wait, Julia said suddenly, shining her flashlight at one section of the wall. Look at this part of the painting. They didn't use a full circle. They used the natural cave walls as part of it, placing the meteorite pieces to complete what was already there. I studied the images and realized she was right. The cave itself is part of the trap. But we still need more fragments, David said. That's when I remembered. The original meteorite, the one that sealed the creature here in the first place. It might still be in the cave somewhere. We searched frantically, checking every crack and crevice of the cave. Dawn light began to filter in through the entrance, giving us a little hope. The skinwalker was strongest at night. Maybe it had retreated to regain its strength. Here, Julia called from a small alcove near the back of the cave. There's something embedded in the wall. Sure enough, half buried in the rock was a large piece of meteorite, black and pitted with age. It had been placed there deliberately, forming part of the original binding circle. We can use this, I said. Break off pieces to complete our circle. David used a rock to chip away at the ancient meteorite, while Julia and I prepared the binding ritual area according to the wall paintings. We placed the 3 fragments David had saved at key points, then added the fresh pieces as he broke them free. It's still not enough, David said, looking at our incomplete circle. We're missing one piece. I felt something in my boot rubbing against my ankle and reached down. It was a small stone I'd picked up the first day, thinking it was just an interesting rock. But now, in the growing light, I saw its true nature, a tiny meteorite fragment, old and worn smooth. This is it, I said, placing it in the last gap of our circle. This completes it. The moment the circle was complete, the air in the cave changed, becoming heavier, charged with energy. The meteor shower was reaching its peak outside, and we could feel its power even in here. Now we need the binding words, I said to Julia. She pulled out her notebook with the translation. I think I got most of it. It's an old form of Navajo, mixed with something else, something older. As she began practicing the words, David suddenly stiffened. It's coming. I could feel it too, a cold pressure in the air, like the feeling before a terrible storm. And with it came a sound. Slow, dragging footsteps approaching the cave. We're not ready, Julia whispered, panic in her voice. Hide, I told them. I'll draw it in. When it crosses the circle, Julia, you start the chant. David, no matter what happens, don't break the circle. They reluctantly moved behind some rocks as I stood at the cave entrance. In the pale morning light, I saw it coming. Professor Whitmore's body, but barely recognizable now. His skin hung loose in places, stretched tight in others. His limbs were too long, joints bending the wrong way, and his eyes were fully yellow, now glowing from within. Tracker, it called in a voice that scraped like dry bones. I can smell your fear. This ends now, I said, stepping backward into the cave, drawing it in. You don't belong here. It laughed, a sound like cracking ice. I've existed longer than your people have had words. I was here before you. I will be here after you. Not. This time, I said, continuing to back up, leading it toward our trap. The skinwalker followed me into the cave, its movements jerky but fast. It sniffed the air, sensing something wrong. What are you planning, little human? It hissed. More. Tricks with water and silver. I kept moving back until I stood just beyond our meteorite circle. The skinwalker paused at the edge, yellow eyes narrowing. A binding circle, it laughed. Amateur work. You need the words, the blood, the timing. It gestured to the meteor shower outside. And that is almost over. It was right. We were running out of time. I had to get it inside the circle now. Whitmore is still alive in there, I said. I can help him if you step inside. The skinwalker's face twisted into Whitmore's for a moment, his human features pleading. Nathan, help me, please. Then it shifted back, laughing at its own trick. Nice. Try, I said. Then I pulled out my last weapon, a small silver mirror my grandmother had given me. I held it up, forcing the creature to see its true reflection. The skinwalker recoiled, hissing in pain and rage at seeing its real self. It lunged forward at me, directly into our circle. "Now!" I shouted. Julia leapt up and began chanting the binding words, her voice growing stronger with each phrase. The meteorite fragments began to glow, pulsing with energy. The skinwalker screamed and tried to retreat, but the circle was working. It couldn't cross back over the boundary. It turned its fury on me instead, its limbs stretching impossibly. To grab me, I dodged, but not fast enough. Its claw-like fingers caught my arm, tearing deep gashes. The pain was like fire, worse than any normal wound. David rushed forward. "It's not working fast enough." He was right. The binding was happening, but too slowly. The skinwalker was fighting it, still strong from the meteor shower. It began to change, cycling through forms rapidly. Whitmore, Julia, me, animals, then something not human at all. "The circle needs to be stronger," Julia said desperately, still chanting between words. David looked at the meteorite fragments, then at the thrashing creature, and I saw understanding pass over his face. "I know what to do," he said quietly. Before I could stop him, David launched himself into the circle, tackling the skinwalker. They fell together, the creature shrieking as David held it down. "David, no!" Julia screamed. "Finish it!" he shouted back, struggling to keep the skinwalker pinned. "I'm completing the circle with myself." The science of it hit me. David had spent days handling the meteorite fragments. They had changed him, somehow made him part of their energy. He was making himself the final piece of the trap. Julia continued the chant, tears streaming down her face. I joined in with the parts I knew, my blood dripping from my wounded arm onto the cave floor. The skinwalker thrashed violently, its form shifting faster and faster between shapes. David held on, though his strength was clearly fading. "Almost done?" he gasped. The energy in the cave built to an unbearable pitch. The meteorite fragments glowed white-hot. The ancient paintings on the walls seemed to move in the pulsing light. With a final deafening shriek, the skinwalker collapsed. Inward, its burrowed form crumbling like dust. A dark cloud hovered for a moment where it had been, then sank into the ground at the center of our circle. And just like that, it was over. The oppressive feeling lifted from the air. The meteorite fragments stopped glowing, cooling rapidly. David lay motionless in the circle. We rushed to him, fearing the worst. But as I reached for his wrist to check for a pulse, his eyes fluttered open. "Did we do it?" he whispered. "We did," I said, relief flooding through me. "You crazy fool, you almost got yourself killed. Worth it?" he said with a weak smile. As we helped David up, I noticed something on the ground where the skinwalker had disappeared, a small pile of dust, and within it, Whitmore's silver watch. There was nothing else left of him. "I'm sorry," I said, picking up the watch. "We were too late for him." "He was already gone," Julia said softly. "I think he was gone that first night." We made our way out of the cave, stepping carefully over our meteorite circle, which we deliberately left intact. Outside, the morning sun had fully risen, warming the canyon with normal, natural heat. The nightmare was over, but none of us would ever be the same. I stood at the edge of Whispering Shadows Canyon, watching the sunset paint the rocks red and gold. A warm breeze carried the scent of sage and dust. It felt normal, peaceful even, but I knew better now. "You didn't have to stay, you know," Julia said, walking up beside me. Her limp was almost gone, though the shadows under her eyes might never fade completely. "Yes, I did," I answered simply. It had been a month since we trapped the skinwalker back. In its prison, the official story was that Professor Whitmore had fallen in a remote part of the canyon during an unfortunate accident. His body was never recovered, just his watch, which we gave to his university colleagues. David had returned to his lab with meteorite samples that he kept locked in a special container. He called every week to make sure everything was still quiet here. Julia had stayed longer than expected, documenting the cave paintings for her research, but she was careful about what she planned to publish. "I'll only share the astronomical calculations," she'd told me. "The rest stays between us." Now she was finally packing up to leave. "The tribal council approved my request to have this area declared restricted," she said. "No more scientific expeditions, no tourists, just you." I nodded. After we'd made it back to civilization, I'd spoken with the elders, including Maria. We all agreed someone needed to watch this place, especially during celestial events. "When does the next major meteor shower happen?" I asked. Julia hesitated. "The cycle is exactly 100 years, but there are smaller showers before then. Nothing that should be powerful enough to wake it up." We both knew should wasn't the same as wouldn't. "I've been thinking about something," I said, keeping my eyes on the horizon. The cave paintings showed that the skinwalker had been trapped before, multiple times. "You think it's happened before?" "The binding failing, then being redone," I nodded. "I think the ancient people knew it wouldn't stay trapped forever. That's why they left the instructions on the wall, for whoever came next." Julia was quiet for a moment. "So it could happen again. Someday. Not in our lifetime, hopefully." We watched the last light fade from the canyon, neither of us mentioning how the shadows seemed to linger in certain spots, longer than they should. "I found something in my research," Julia finally said, "about skinwalkers in other cultures. Different names, but similar stories. They're not just Navajo legends." "Doesn't surprise me," I said. "Some things are older than any one people's stories." And Jim, night fell completely. I switched on my flashlight. I'd taken to carrying extra batteries now, and my silver knife never left my belt. "Will you be okay out here alone?" Julia asked as we walked back to her Jeep. I thought about it. "I'm not sure any of us will ever be fully okay again, but I'll be fine." She hugged me tightly before getting into her vehicle. "I'll be back to check on you, and if anything strange happens, anything at all, call me immediately." I promised I would. As her tail lights disappeared down the dusty road, I turned back to face the canyon. In the starlight it looked peaceful, beautiful even. But now I knew what slept beneath the ancient rocks. Later that night, I sat by my campfire outside the small cabin I'd built near the canyon entrance. The stars wheeled overhead, normal and familiar, but I kept my silver knife close and my eyes on the shadows. Sometimes, when the moon hits the canyon walls just right, I think I see movement in those shadows. And on very quiet nights, if I listen carefully, I can almost hear something breathing beneath the rocks, waiting, dreaming of the next time the stars fall. But for now, the skinwalker sleeps again, and I keep watch. Another link in the chain of guardians stretching back through time. We may never fully destroy such ancient evils, but we can keep binding them, generation after generation. As my grandfather used to say, some battles don't end with victory or defeat. They just get past. On to the next warrior, and so I wait and watch and remember, because the stars will fall again someday. Some folks say the bayou has a memory longer than the oldest cypress. Me? I know it's true. My name's Raymond Thibodeau, and this marsh has been home to my family for 6 generations. What happened that summer of '63 still wakes me in the dead. Of night, skin slick with sweat that ain't just from the heat. It all started with the drought, worst one anybody could remember. The water had pulled back like the bayou itself was holding its breath, waiting. Dead fish belly up everywhere, the stink-drawing clouds of flies that hung in the air like dark thoughts. I didn't want no part of those city people and their cameras. But times were hard, and the money they offered would help Mama with her medicine. So there I was, loading my pirogue, the same one I carved by hand from a single cypress trunk, ready to guide these strangers through my dying marsh. "Mr. Thibodeau, we can't thank you enough," said Dr. Reynolds, a skinny man with glasses who kept writing in his little notebook. He studied plants and water and such, seemed decent enough. Unlike many scientists who came before him, the woman, Audrey, was different. Half Cajun herself, though she'd grown up in New Orleans. She handled her cameras like they were babies, all gentle-like. "These photos will help people understand what's happening here," she said, and I almost believed her. Then there was Victor Landry, the company man. Oil company, that is. Said he was just observing, but his eyes were too hungry when he looked at my marsh. I didn't trust him from the start. As we pushed off, Mama Louise grabbed my arm. Her fingers felt like tree roots, strong despite her years. "Raymond," she whispered, her voice low so the others couldn't hear. "Remember the old agreement. The water is too low. Things that should stay hidden won't be for long." I nodded, feeling the weight of my grandfather's journal in my pocket and the talisman, carved from an alligator tooth, against my chest. Mama had the sight sometimes, knew things before they happened. But I figured this was just old stories. Talking. The bayou was too quiet that day. No frogs singing, no nutria splashing away from our boat. Just the sound of our paddle cutting through water and the occasional cry of a lonely bird. The stillness made my skin prickle. "Is it always this quiet?" Dr. Reynolds asked, scribbling away. "No," I said, not wanting to say more. "Some feelings you don't share with outsiders. We passed the old McCreary place, abandoned now for 20 years. The house was slowly sinking into the water, nature reclaiming what man had built. As we drifted by, I swear I saw something move in one of the broken windows. Probably just a raccoon, I told myself, but deep down I knew better. The marsh was watching us, and it wasn't happy. We made camp on a small patch of high ground as the sun started to sink. The sky turned the color of bruises, purple, yellow, and that deep blue that comes before true dark. I built a fire while the others set up their fancy tents. "Strange," Dr. Reynolds said, looking at his instruments. "The water level has risen 2 inches since we arrived." I looked up sharply. "That ain't possible, not in this drought." But when I checked myself, pushing a stick into the water at the edge of our camp, I saw he was right. The water was creeping up, though there hadn't been a drop of rain in weeks. After a supper of fish I'd caught and fried, we sat around the fire. The flames made our faces look like masks, half lit and half hidden. That's when we heard it, a soft thump against the bottom of my pirogue, which I'd pulled up onto land. "Probably just a turtle," I said, but I didn't believe my own words. Grabbed my flashlight and went to check. The bottom of my boat had a fresh scratch. No, more like a gouge, running nearly the whole length, like something with claws had tried to cut through. "Everything okay?" Audrey called, her camera hanging around her neck even in the dark. "Fine," I lied. "No need to scare them. Not yet." Later, when the others were asleep in their tents, I took my flashlight and walked to an ancient cypress that stood alone at the edge of the clearing. My grandfather had shown it to me when I was just a boy. The trunk was wider than 3. Men standing with their arms stretched out, touching fingertips. I shined my light on the bark, finding what I knew would be there, carvings older than anyone could remember, pictures of men with animal heads, wavy lines that meant water, and warnings in a language no one speaks anymore. As I traced the carvings with my fingers, something bright caught my eye out in the water. At first I thought it was just moonlight, reflecting, but the moon was hidden behind clouds that night. The water itself was glowing, soft blue-green patches that moved like they had a mind of their own. In all my years in the bayou, I'd never seen anything like it. I heard the click of a camera behind me. Audrey had followed me, silent as a ghost. "What is that?" she whispered, taking more pictures. "Don't know," I said honestly, "but we should get back to camp." As we turned to go, I swear the glow in the water followed our movements, like eyes watching us from below. And worse, the water had risen another inch, now lapping at the roots of the cypress where the carvings ended. Back in my sleeping bag, I pulled out my grandfather's journal, its leather cover smooth from years of handling. Inside were drawings and notes about the old ways, the old beliefs, about agreements made long ago between my people and what he called the water people. I'd always thought they were just stories to keep children from wandering too far into the marsh alone. Now I wasn't so sure. The last thing I remember before falling asleep was the sound of water gently rising and something that might have been breathing just outside my tent. I woke at dawn to the sounds of panicked voices. Dr. Reynolds was standing at the edge of our camp, pointing at something in the trees. "Are those claw marks?" I joined him, feeling my stomach drop as I saw what had caught his attention. 3 deep gouges ran up the trunk of a water oak, starting about 7 feet off the ground and stretching upward. They looked fresh, the pale inner wood still damp where the bark had been torn away. "Could be a bear," I said, though we both knew there hadn't been bears in these parts for decades. "That high up?" Reynolds shook his head. "And look at the spacing between the marks. They were too wide for any animal I knew, and too deliberate. As we ate breakfast, I noticed the local wildlife acting strange. A group of nutria, usually shy swamp rats that run at the first sign of humans, stood at the water's edge, watching us. Their eyes seemed to follow our every move. A blue heron landed nearby and just stared, not fishing or moving on like they normally would. "The animals are agitated," I said quietly to Audrey as she packed her camera gear. "We should finish what you folks need to do and head back before dark." She nodded, but I could see the excitement in her eyes, the wrong kind of excitement, the kind that makes people do foolish things. Dr. Reynolds spent the morning taking water samples from different spots. I watched him frown more and more as he tested each one. "These readings don't make sense," he muttered, showing me a vial of water that had a faint greenish tint. "There's something in here I can't identify, some kind of compound I've never seen before." While Reynolds worked, Victor Landry kept wandering off on his own. I caught him once scraping something off a tree into a small container. He quickly pocketed it when he noticed me watching. "Just collecting some moss samples," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Company research." Around midday, we loaded up the pirogue to check some of the deeper channels. The water had risen even more overnight, flooding areas that had been dry just yesterday. It made no sense with the drought. That's when our troubles really started. First, Reynolds' fancy electronic equipment began to fail. His water testing kit sparked and died. Audrey's camera battery drained in minutes, though she'd charged it fully that morning. Then we found the tracks. They were at the edge of a small island where we'd stopped to rest. At first glance, they looked almost human. 2 feet, walking, upright. But they were too large, with odd indentations where toes should be, like whoever made them had webs between their toes. And there were claw marks at the tips. "What kind of animal makes tracks like this?" Audrey asked, snapping photos before the rising water could wash them away. "No animal I've ever seen," I admitted, as I pushed our boat back into the water. Something moved beneath the surface, something big. The pirogue rocked violently, nearly tipping us out. "What was that?" Reynolds gasped, gripping the sides. "Gator, maybe," I said, but I knew better. Alligators don't make the water move like that. And they don't leave handprints, yes, handprints, in the mud as they slip away. The sun was starting to sink lower in the sky when we headed back to camp. No one spoke much. We were all watching the water, watching the trees, feeling like we were being watched right back. That night, as I checked my grandfather's journal by flashlight, I found a page I'd never noticed before. It showed a drawing of a creature, half man and half something else, rising from the water. Beneath it were words in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. "When the water drops too low, the guardian rises. The agreement must be honored." I closed the journal, my hands not quite steady. Out in the darkness, something splashed in the water, something that shouldn't be there. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Every snap of a twig, every splash in the water had me sitting up, straining to see in the dark. The others were restless too. I could hear them tossing and turning in their tents. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and sat by the dying embers of our fire, my grandfather's journal open on my lap. I read by the light of my flashlight, turning pages filled with stories I'd always thought were just that. Stories. One passage caught my eye. The water people require respect. They guard the deep places. When men break faith with them, they rise to restore the balance. I thought about the oil companies that had started drilling closer and closer to our bayou over the past few years, the strange chemicals sometimes found in the water, the fish born with extra fins or missing eyes. The sound of a zipper made me look up. Audrey emerged from her tent, wrapped in a jacket despite the heat. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting next to me. "Got too much on my mind," I admitted. She nodded toward the journal. "Family heirloom?" "My grandfather's. He wrote down all the old stories, the things you're supposed to remember if you live in the bayou." "Like what?" I hesitated, then decided to tell her. "Like agreements made with the water people, creatures that live in the deep parts of the marsh. Guardians, he called them." She didn't laugh like I expected. Instead, she pulled up her sleeve and showed me her arm. An angry red rash spread from her wrist almost to her elbow. "I got this after I touched the water today," she said quietly, "and it's changing." She was right. The rash wasn't random. It formed patterns, the same wavy lines I'd seen on the ancient cypress tree. As we watched, the pattern seemed to shift slightly, like it was alive. "We should wake the others," I began, but a sound from the water stopped me cold. It was a voice, or something like a voice, calling from out in the darkness. It sounded like someone drowning, gasping for air. Between words we couldn't quite make out. "Hello," Audrey called. "Is someone there?" I grabbed her arm. "Don't answer it, but what if someone needs help?" "That ain't a person," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing human makes sounds like that." The voice called again, closer now. It had a wet, gurgling quality that raised the hairs on my neck. This time, it almost sounded like it was saying my name. Dr. Reynolds stumbled out of his tent, looking confused. "Did someone call for help?" Before I could answer, a splash echoed across the water, like something big had jumped or fallen in. Then silence. "We need to leave at first light," I said. "This ain't safe anymore." Reynolds frowned. "But my research—" "Won't matter if you're dead," I cut him off. "Is this about those old superstitions?" Victor Landry's voice made us all jump. He stood in the shadow of his tent watching us. "The company has heard all those stories before, myths to scare off progress." "You knew?" I turned to him. "You knew about what's out there?" A smile ghosted across his face. "Let's just say you're not the first guy to tell tales about water people. We found similar stories at other sites." "They ain't just stories," I said. Audrey showed him her arm. "Then explain this." Victor's eyes widened, just for a second, before his face went blank again. "Poison ivy, probably." "Poison ivy doesn't make patterns," Reynolds said, leaning in to examine Audrey's arm. "This is remarkable, almost like some kind of toxic reaction, but I've never seen anything like it." As they talked, I noticed our camp had grown quiet, too quiet. No insects chirping, no frogs calling. Even the nightbirds were silent. It was like the whole bayou was holding its breath, waiting. The water lapped against the shore, just inches from our camp now. In the dim glow of the dying fire, I thought I saw something move just beneath the surface. A shadow darker than the rest of the water, circling our little island of dry land. "Get in your tents," I said suddenly. "Lock up your food. Don't go near the water, not for anything." "Why?" Reynolds asked, but I could see in his eyes he already knew the answer. "Because," I said, "we're being hunted." Morning came with a heavy fog that hung over the water like a burial shroud. I was up before the sun, checking the water level. It had risen another few inches overnight. Our little island of dry land was shrinking by the hour. We ate a quick breakfast, Nobody talking much. The events of the night before had left us all on edge. Dr. Reynolds kept glancing at his watch, then at his equipment. "I need more water samples," he announced suddenly. "From the deeper channel we passed yesterday. The readings I'm getting are unlike anything in the scientific literature." "Not a good idea," I warned. "We should be packing up, heading back." "Just one more sample," he insisted. "An hour tops. It could be groundbreaking research." I didn't like it, but Reynolds was paying the bills. So we loaded up the pirogue and pushed off into the fog. Audrey's rash had spread overnight, now covering most of her left arm. The patterns had become clearer, shapes that matched the old carvings exactly. We reached the deep channel around mid-morning. The fog was still thick, making it hard to see more than 20 feet in any direction. Reynolds leaned over the side of our boat with his sampling equipment. "Be quick," I told him. He nodded, dipping his collection tube into the dark water. That's when everything went wrong. The water around the boat began to bubble, like it was boiling. Reynolds jerked back, but not fast enough. Something grabbed his arm and pulled. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone, yanked under without even a scream. "Martin!" Audrey shouted, lunging toward where he disappeared. I grabbed her, pulling her back just as the water erupted again. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, I saw it. A face that wasn't a face, more like a dog's head, but with scales instead of fur. Eyes that glowed like the bioluminescence we'd seen. Then it was gone, taking Reynolds with it. Victor scrambled to the other end of the pirogue, his face white as paper. "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer. I was too busy grabbing my paddle, trying to get us moving away from that spot. But the water around us suddenly rose up, forming a wall that blocked our escape. It wasn't natural. Water doesn't move that way. It was like the marsh itself was keeping us there. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the water wall collapsed. The boat rocked violently, nearly tipping us out. "We have to find Martin," Audrey cried, her camera forgotten in her lap. "He's gone," I said, my voice hollow, but we searched anyway. For hours we circled the area, calling Reynolds' name until our voices gave out. All we found was his sample tube, floating empty, and a strange mark on a nearby tree. A symbol pressed into the bark, like it had been burned there. The same symbol that now crawled across Audrey's skin. It was late afternoon when we finally found something else. Reynolds' backpack, caught on a branch hanging over the water. Inside was his notebook, the pages damp but readable. The last entry sent a chill down my spine. "Water samples contain unknown compound. Similar molecular structure to hallucinogens but unique. Could explain local legends. Appears to be increasing in concentration. Source unknown." Victor snatched the notebook from my hands. "This is company property now." "The hell it is," I said, grabbing it back. "That thing took Reynolds because he was poking where he shouldn't. And I'm betting you know more than you're saying." Victor's eyes narrowed. "The company has encountered similar situations, unexplained phenomena around certain watersheds, usually ones with potential for development." "You knew something was here," Audrey said, her voice shaking with anger. "You knew and you let us come anyway." "We didn't know what it was," Victor insisted. "Just that sometimes people reported strange sightings before we started drilling. We thought it was just locals trying to scare us off." As the sun began to set, we had no choice but to make camp again, this time on a different patch of high ground. No one mentioned going home anymore. We all knew we had to find Reynolds, or what was left of him. That night, as I kept watch, I saw symbols appearing on trees around our camp, water stains that formed the same marks from my grandfather's journal, the marks of the Guardian, the one who enforced the old agreement, an agreement that had clearly been broken. The night grew thick around us, pressing in like a living thing. None of us could sleep after what happened to Reynolds. I sat by our campfire, turning the pages of my grandfather's journal, looking for anything that might help us survive. "Can you read that in this light?" Audrey asked, sitting down beside me. Her rash had spread further, now creeping up her neck like red vines. "I've been reading this book since I was a boy," I said. "I know most of it by heart, but there's parts—" I trailed off, turning to a section written in faded ink. "What does it say?" she asked. "It's about the water people, the Guardians." I ran my finger along the words. "My grandfather wrote that they've been here since before people. They protect the deep places of the bayou, keep the balance." "You really believe that?" I looked up at her. "After what you saw today, you don't." She touched her arm where the patterns swirled. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Victor sat across the fire, pretending not to listen, but I could see him leaning closer. "The journal says there was a deal made," I continued. "My ancestors promised to protect the waters, keep them clean and healthy. In return, the Guardians would stay in the deep and leave us be." "And if the deal is broken?" Audrey asked quietly. Before I could answer, we heard something moving through the underbrush. We all froze, listening to the slow, heavy steps coming. "Closer!" "Raymond!" A familiar voice called out. "Raymond, boy, where are you?" "Mama!" I couldn't believe my ears. I grabbed my flashlight and rushed toward the sound, Audrey close behind me. There she was, my mother, Louise Thibodeau, making her way through the marsh like she was taking a Sunday stroll. "Mama, what are you doing out here?" I helped her to our camp, noticing how she moved with purpose despite her 72 years. "You think I can't feel when the old agreement is broken?" she said, her voice sharp. "I've been feeling it for days. The water rising when it shouldn't, the animals acting strange." I introduced her to Audrey and Victor, watching as her eyes narrowed. "At the oil company, man. Your people been digging where you shouldn't," she told him flatly, "putting poisons in the water that change things. Old things." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "We follow all environmental regulations," Mama snorted. "There's older laws than those made in Baton Rouge. The Guardian is awake now and angry." "What Guardian?" Audrey asked, showing Mama her arm. "Is this connected?" Mama gently took Audrey's arm, tracing the patterns with her weathered finger. "It's marking you, claiming you." "For what?" Audrey's voice trembled. "I don't know," Mama admitted. "This ain't like the old stories. Something's different." She turned to me. "The creature's been corrupted. The chemicals in the water changed. It..." As if summoned by her words, Reynolds stumbled into our camp, wet and wild-eyed. "Martin!" Audrey rushed to him but stopped short. Something was wrong. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. When he opened his mouth to speak, water dribbled out instead of words. "Don't touch him," Mama warned. "He's been taken." Reynolds stood swaying, water constantly trickling from his mouth, nose, and ears. His skin had a faint blue tint in the firelight. "What happened to you?" Victor demanded. "What did you see?" Reynolds turned to him, his movements jerky, like a puppet, when he finally spoke. His voice bubbled as if he was speaking underwater. "It knows. It knows what you're planning, the drilling, the chemicals." He pointed a shaking finger at Victor. "It showed me, under the water, pipes leaking poison, killing everything." Victor backed away. "You're out of your mind. It's controlling him," Mama said quietly to me. "Using him to speak." Reynolds' head snapped toward her with an unnatural motion. "The old woman knows. She remembers the pact." "I remember," Mama said, standing her ground. "And I remember how to speak to your kind. You were meant to protect, not destroy." Reynolds laughed, a horrible gurgling sound. "We change as the water changes. Your kind poisoned us. Now we poison in return." He lurched forward suddenly, grabbing Victor's arm. Victor yelled and tried to pull away, but Reynolds held tight. "The company man brings the final corruption," Reynolds said, water streaming down his face like tears. "We have seen your plans. The new drilling will destroy everything." Then Reynolds collapsed, falling to the ground like his strings had been cut. He lay there twitching, water pooling beneath him. Audrey knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "He's alive, but barely." "We need to get him out of here," I said. Mama shook her head. No one's leaving now. The waters are rising too fast. The Guardian won't let us go. She was right. I could hear it. Water rushing in from all sides, surrounding our little island. When I shined my flashlight toward the sound, I saw the water moving against the current, flowing uphill in places. Impossible, but happening right in front of us. Then what do we do? Audrey asked, her hand unconsciously moving to the patterns on her skin. Mama looked at me, her eyes reflecting the firelight. We need to go to the meeting ground, the place where the first agreement was made. Maybe we can make a new one. Where is this place? Victor asked, his businesslike manner cracking at the edges. Deep in the bayou, I said. A place my family has protected for generations. Mama nodded. We go at first light. If the Guardian will listen to anyone, it will be a Thibodeau. As if in answer, a low howl rose from the water around us, part animal, part something else. The sound made my blood freeze. Beside me, Audrey gasped as the patterns on her skin began to glow faintly in the darkness, matching the bioluminescence that now surrounded our shrinking island. The water people were closing in. None of us slept much that night. Reynolds lay by the fire, breathing but not waking. Sometimes water would trickle from his mouth, even though we hadn't given him anything to drink. As the first grey light of dawn broke through the trees, Mama was already up, mixing things in a small pot she'd brought with her. The smell was sharp, and green like plants crushed after rain. What's that? I asked, crouching beside her. Protection, she said simply. Herbs that the water people respected in the old days. Sweet flag, sage, cypress bark. She looked up at me. It may not work, now that the creature has changed, but we try anyway. She dipped her fingers in the mixture and drew symbols on my forehead, then on her own. When Audrey approached, Mama hesitated. It's already marked you in its own way, she said, looking at the patterns that now covered most of Audrey's left. He sighed. But we'll try. She drew the symbols on Audrey too. Victor hung back, watching us with narrowed eyes. You too, Mama called to him, unless you want to be the next one talking water. He came forward reluctantly and let her mark him. While Mama worked, I checked our supplies. We had enough food for maybe one more day. Water was running low, ironic. Surrounded as we were by water we couldn't drink, the marsh had become our prison. How far to this meeting place? Audrey asked as she packed up her cameras. Half a day by boat, I answered, if the bayou lets us pass. Victor was on his satellite phone, trying to call his company. No signal, he muttered, shoving it back in his pocket. We're on our own. We've always been on our own out here, I told him. We loaded Reynolds into the pirogue. He was like a ragdoll, limp and unresponsive. His skin felt cold and clammy, and those strange blue tints had spread. As we pushed off, I noticed the water had changed. It was darker now, with an oily sheen that wasn't there before. Here and there, patches of that strange bioluminescence swirled beneath the surface, even in daylight. Don't touch the water, Mama warned. Not with your bare skin. We paddled in, silence, following channels I'd known since childhood. But they looked different now. Trees that should have been on dry land stood in water up to their lower branches. Familiar landmarks were underwater or gone completely. Twice we had to change course when walls of water rose up to block our path. The marsh was herding us, I realized, directing us. Around midday, Audrey gasped and pointed to a half-submerged cypress. On its trunk, clear as day, was a photograph, one of hers that she'd taken yesterday, developed and pinned to the bark. It showed the creature just for an instant as it took Reynolds. The image was blurry but unmistakable, a scaled form with a dog-like head rising from the water. I didn't develop that, she whispered. I couldn't have. It's showing us it knows. We've seen it, I said. No more hiding. Victor leaned forward to study the photo. The company needs to see this, proof of what we've been hearing about. You still thinking about profit at a time like this? I snapped. Not profit, he said quietly. Containment. This isn't the first incident, but it's the first time we've had evidence. A splash behind us cut off further conversation. Reynolds had suddenly sat up, his eyes open but still vacant. He pointed ahead, that terrible gurgling sound coming from his throat again. "It's guiding us," Mama said. By late afternoon, we reached a part of the bayou I hadn't visited in years. The trees here were ancient, their massive roots creating a natural island that stayed above water even in flood season. In the center stood a stone that didn't belong, a dark, smooth obelisk about the height of a man. "The meeting place," Mama said, "where the first agreement was made." As our boat touched the shore of the island, Reynolds suddenly came to life. He scrambled out of the pirogue with unnatural speed and disappeared into the trees. "Let him go," Mama said when I started to follow. "He belongs to the water now." We made camp at the edge of the island, as far from the water as we could get, which wasn't far enough for my liking. Mama began preparations for the ritual, arranging objects in a circle around the stone. Candles, small bundles of herbs, and something I recognized from our home, my grandfather's old Cajun accordion. "Music to call them," she explained. "The water people always loved music." Victor paced nervously at the edge of our camp. "This is insane. We should be trying to get back to civilization, not deeper into this swamp." "You got a boat hidden somewhere?" I asked him. "Because unless you can walk on water, this is our only chance." Audrey sat quietly, examining her camera. The patterns on her skin were changing again, shifting and swirling like they were alive. Sometimes they glowed faintly, matching pulses of light we could see in the water. "What will happen at this ritual?" she asked Mama. "We speak to the Guardian," Mama said. "Remind it of the old ways. Try to make peace." "And if that doesn't work?" Victor demanded. Mama's eyes were dark and serious in the fading light. "Then may God have mercy on our souls, because the water people won't." As night fell, the sounds of the bayou changed. The normal chorus of frogs and insects died away, replaced by something else, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to come from the water itself. The bioluminescence grew stronger, patches of glowing water expanding, until the entire bayou around our island shone with an eerie blue light. Mama handed me the accordion. "You'll need to play when the time comes," she said. "Your grandfather taught you the old songs." I nodded, feeling the weight of the instrument in my hands. It had been years since I'd played, but my fingers remembered. "The keys, and what about me?" Audrey asked, her voice steady despite everything. Mama studied her for a long moment. "You're already part of this," she said finally. "The Guardian has chosen you as a witness. Your pictures will tell the story, whatever happens." "I don't understand," Audrey began, but Victor interrupted. "Someone's coming," he hissed, pointing toward the water. We all turned to look. A figure was walking toward us across the glowing water, walking on top of it as if it were solid ground. It was Reynolds, but not Reynolds. His movements were too fluid, too graceful for a human, and his eyes glowed with the same blue light as the water beneath his feet. "The ritual begins," Mama said softly. "Ready yourselves." Reynolds walked onto the island, water streaming from his clothes, though they never seemed to get dry. His eyes glowed that unnatural blue, fixed on us like we were prey. "The Guardian comes," he said in that terrible, gurgling voice. "It will speak through me." Mama stepped forward, her back straight despite her years. "We come to honor the old agreement," she said, "to remind the Guardian of its true purpose." Reynolds tilted his head, an animal-like motion that sent chills down my spine. "The agreement is broken. The waters are poisoned. The Guardian has changed." "We can fix this," Mama insisted. "The Thibodeau family has kept faith for generations." "Not all humans have kept faith," Reynolds said, pointing at Victor. "This one's people plan greater poison, new wells, deeper drilling." Victor stepped back, his face pale. I could see he was trembling. "Is that true?" I demanded. Victor swallowed hard. "The company has plans for expansion, yes. But you knew," Audrey cut in. You knew, and you brought us out here anyway? I didn't know it would be like this, Victor snapped. The other incidents were nothing like this. Just sightings, strange water readings. Nothing attacked people before. Because the poison has reached the deep places now, Reynolds said. The Guardian changes with the water. It becomes what you made it. Mama began. The ritual, lighting the candles around the stone. She spoke words in old Cajun French, phrases I recognized from my grandfather's teachings. Prayers to the water, to the land, asking for balance to be restored. I started to play the accordion as she'd instructed, an old tune that had been passed down through generations. The mournful notes drifted across the water, echoing among the cypress trees. For a moment it seemed to be working. The blue glow in the water pulsed in time with the music. Reynolds swayed slightly, his glowing eyes dimming just a bit. Then Victor made his move. He'd been inching toward his pack. Now he lunged for it, pulling out something I hadn't seen before, a small metal case. He flipped it open, revealing a syringe and several vials. "What are you doing?" I shouted, never stopping the music. "Taking a sample," he said, his voice hard. "If this thing exists, the company needs to study it. Do you have any idea what this could be worth?" Mama turned to him, her face fierce in the candlelight. "Stop, you fool! You'll ruin everything!" But Victor wasn't listening. He approached Reynolds, syringe in hand. The company will contain it, study it, maybe even control it. Reynolds smiled then, a horrible, wide smile that showed teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous for a human. "Mouth. Control," he gurgled. "You think you can control the water?" The water around our island exploded upward, not just in one place, but everywhere at once, like dozens of geysers erupting. I dropped the accordion, lunging for Mama to pull her back. From every column of water emerged creatures, alligators, snakes, snapping turtles, but wrong somehow. Their eyes glowed with that same blue light. They slithered and crawled onto our island, surrounding us. "The Guardian calls it servants," Mama gasped. Victor panicked. He pulled something else from his bag, a gun. He fired at Reynolds, the shot echoing across the water. Reynolds didn't fall. The bullet hit him square in the chest, but instead of blood, water gushed from the wound. His smile grew wider. "The Guardian cannot be killed by such means," he said. Then the water itself rose up behind Reynolds, forming a massive shape. For just a moment, I saw it clearly. The creature from my grandfather's drawings. A scaled body that stood upright like a man, but wasn't a man. Webbed hands with long claws. And that head, like a dog, but not a dog, with glowing eyes and rows of teeth. It roared, and the sound made my bones shake. The controlled animals attacked. Snakes lunged at our legs. Alligators snapped their massive jaws. Somehow, none came near Audrey. The patterns on her skin glowed brightly now, pulsing in time with the creature's movements. I fought off a water moccasin, its fangs inches from my face. Mama was chanting louder now, trying to complete the ritual. Victor kept firing his gun until it clicked empty. That's when it happened. An alligator, bigger than any I'd ever seen, lunged at Mama. I tried to reach her, but I was too far away. Its jaws closed around her leg, dragging her toward the water. "Mama!" I screamed, fighting through the mass of creatures to reach her. She looked at me, her eyes calm despite the pain. "Finish it, Raymond," she called. "Only a Thibodeau can make the new pact." The alligator pulled her under before I could reach her. The water bubbled and churned where she disappeared, then went still. I fell to my knees. The animals retreated slightly, forming a circle around us. Victor cowered on the ground, his empty gun still clutched in his hand. Only Audrey stood tall, her glowing marks making her look like something not quite human herself. The water rose again, forming that terrible shape. Reynolds stood before it, a prophet before his God. "The old woman is taken," he gurgled. "Who will speak for the humans now?" I stood up slowly, grief and rage burning inside me. "I will," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm Raymond Thibodeau. This is my bayou, too." The creature tilted its massive head, regarding me with eyes that glowed like toxic waste. "What fact would you make, Raymond Thibodeau?" Reynolds asked, water spilling from his mouth with every word. Before I could answer, Victor broke. He ran, splashing into the water, trying to escape. He made it 3 steps before the water seemed to grab him, pulling him under without a sound. He didn't come back up. Now it was just me and Audrey facing the nightmare my grandfather had warned about. The Guardian, corrupted by the very poisons it was meant to protect against. The water people changed into something vengeful and wrong. The island beneath our feet began to shrink as water crept higher, leaving us on a patch of land barely big enough for 2 people. "What do we do now?" Audrey whispered, her camera forgotten, in her hands. I looked at the accordion lying on the ground, then at the patterns glowing on Audrey's skin. An idea began to form, a desperate one. "We finished the ritual," I said, "but not the way Mama planned." The creature loomed over us, waiting for an answer, waiting to see if there was still a pact to be made, or if the waters would rise and never fall again. I picked up the accordion, feeling its worn keys under my fingers. The creature watched my every move, its glowing eyes never blinking. "What are you doing?" Audrey whispered, standing close to me on our shrinking island. "Something my grandfather wrote about," I said quietly. "The Guardian has a weakness. Sound. Specific sounds that hurt it. That's why the music was part of the ritual." The water around us bubbled and churned, rising higher. We had minutes, maybe less. "Raymond Thibodeau," Reynolds gurgled, still speaking for the creature. "What pact do you offer?" I took a deep breath and began to play. Not the ritual song Mama had taught me, but something different, a high, piercing melody that cut through the night air like a knife. My grandfather had written about this tune, saying it was never to be played near water unless all else failed. The effect was immediate. Reynolds clutched his head, water streaming from his eyes like tears. The creature reared back, its form wavering. The glowing water pulsed erratically. "Keep playing," Audrey urged. I did, my fingers moving faster, the notes climbing higher. The controlled animals retreated, slipping back into the water. The creature thrashed, its shape becoming less distinct. Audrey gasped beside me. The patterns on her skin were changing again, not just glowing but shifting, pulling away from her body like they were being drawn toward the creature. "It's working," she said through gritted teeth. "Whatever was in me is going back to it." But then my worst fear happened. The accordion began to fail. One of the reeds cracked, making a harsh, discordant sound. The instrument was old, not meant for such intense playing. The creature sensed the weakness. It surged forward, one massive clawed hand reaching for me. I kept playing the broken instrument, knowing it was our only chance. "Raymond," Audrey said. Suddenly, her voice calm in the chaos. "I know what to do." She raised her camera and began taking pictures rapidly, the flash going off again and again. Each burst of light seemed to hit the creature like a physical blow. It recoiled, that dog-like head turning away from the brightness. The light hurts it, she realized. It lives in the dark depths. It can't stand bright light. Between my broken music and her camera flashes, we had the creature retreating. But it wasn't enough. The water continued to rise, now at our knees. Reynolds collapsed suddenly, falling face first into the water. The connection broken, I thought, for a moment. But then his body began to change, twisting in ways a human body shouldn't move. His skin darkened, hardened, became something like scales. "It's taking him completely," Audrey whispered in horror. I knew then what I had to do. The old stories were clear. The Guardian required balance, a sacrifice. "Audrey," I said, never stopping my playing, "when I tell you, run for the boat. Get as far from here as you can." "What? I'm not leaving you." "You have to," I insisted. "Someone needs to tell the story. Show what happened here. Stop the oil company from poisoning more water." She shook her head. There has to be another way. There wasn't. I could feel it in my bones. The creature wanted a guardian, a human guardian to replace what had been corrupted. It had tried to take Reynolds, but he wasn't right. It had marked Audrey, but didn't take her. It wanted a Thibodeau, someone connected to the old pact. The boat's still at the edge of the island, I said. When I move toward it, you run the other way. The creature rose up again, massive and terrible. With Reynolds fully transformed, it could now speak directly. Sound like rushing water forming words. A pact, it burbled. The old family, the old blood. Yes, I said, stepping forward, still playing the failing accordion. A new pact. I offer myself as guardian in exchange for peace. Audrey grabbed my arm. Raymond, no! But I had seen what was left of my mother disappear into those waters. I had watched the creature change Reynolds into something inhuman. The bayou was my home, my responsibility. If someone had to be sacrificed to save it, to restore the balance, it would be me. Run, I told Audrey. Now! I charged toward the creature, playing the accordion as loudly as the broken instrument would allow. The creature's attention fixed. On me, those glowing eyes widening. Audrey ran, splashing through the shallow water toward the pirogue. Good. At least one of us would survive to tell the story. The creature reached for me with webbed, clawed hands. I felt the cold, wet touch on my skin. The accordion fell from my hands as the creature pulled me forward. Then, something unexpected happened. Audrey's voice rang out across the water. She was standing in the pirogue, my grandfather's journal, open in her hands. She was reading from it. Words I'd never found in a language I didn't understand. The creature froze, its grip on me loosening slightly. The true pact, Audrey called. Your purpose is to protect, not destroy. The balance must be restored. The water around us began to swirl faster and faster, forming a whirlpool with us at the center. The creature seemed confused, torn between taking me and responding to the ancient words Audrey was reading. I felt something change within me then. A certainty, a knowledge that came from somewhere beyond myself. I reached up and touched the creature's scaled face. I accept the role of guardian, I said. Not as your slave, but as your balance, human and water together again. The creature's eyes flared brighter for a moment. Then it released me, stepping back. The whirlpool around us grew stronger, spinning faster until water and air blended, together in a roaring tornado. I heard Audrey scream my name one last time. Then the water closed over my head, and darkness took me. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the shore of the island. The morning sun filtered through the cypress trees. The water was calm, back at its normal level, and I was changed. I could feel it immediately. My skin felt different, not scaled, but somehow tougher. When I looked at my hands, I could see faint blue lines beneath the skin, like glowing veins. And I could sense the water all around me. I could feel its movements, its currents, as if it were an extension of my own body. Audrey knelt beside me, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. The patterns on her skin were gone. "Raymond," she whispered, "is it still you?" I nodded, sitting up slowly. "It's me, but also something more." The creature was gone, Reynolds too. The only sign of what had happened was a new carving on the ancient stone, a symbol that matched the one that had been on Audrey's skin, now etched permanently in the rock. "The pact is remade," I said, somehow knowing it was true. "The Guardian has a human counterpart now. Me." Audrey helped me to my feet. "What happens now?" I looked out across the bayou, seeing it with new eyes. I could sense the poison still there, the damage done, but I could also feel how to heal it, how to guide, the water to cleanse itself. "Now," I said, "we go home and tell them what happened. Show them your pictures. Stop the drilling before more damage is done." "And you?" she asked softly. I touched the water with my fingertips, watching it rise up slightly to meet my hand, responding to my will. I stay in the bayou, I said. I keep the new pact. I become what my family was always meant to be, not just protectors, but part of what we protect. The water rippled around my fingers, glowing faintly blue. Somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. The Guardian and I were linked now, two halves of the same purpose. The bayou would heal, and I would change. Not human, not creature, but something in between. A true guardian of the marshland. The heavy summer rain tapped on the tin roof of my cabin, a soothing rhythm I'd come to love even more these past weeks. I sat on the porch, watching water droplets dance as they hit the surface of the bayou. 1 month since that night on the island. 1 month since I'd become something not quite human anymore. A car door slammed in the distance. The only road ended a 1/4 mile away, and visitors had to walk the rest. I didn't need to guess who it was. I could feel her presence, the specific ripple of her footsteps through the wet ground. Audrey appeared around the bend, a folder tucked under her raincoat. "Brought you the newspaper," she called, climbing the steps to my porch. "And some other things you should see." I smiled, pouring her a glass of sweet tea from the pitcher beside me. The blue lines beneath my skin glowed faintly, always more visible when I was near water, which these days was all the time. "How'd the meeting go?" I asked. She sighed, taking the chair next to mine. "About as well as we expected. They published my story, but as a local legend piece. The photos were called artistic interpretations." "And the oil company?" A smile crept across her face. "That's the good news. The EPA launched an investigation after I sent them the water samples Reynolds collected. They found enough violations to halt the new drilling project." I nodded, feeling a ripple of satisfaction in the water around my home. The Guardian was pleased. "What about Reynolds' notes? Victor's company?" "That's complicated." She pulled some papers from her folder. "The company denies everything, of course. Says Victor was acting alone, went missing during a routine survey. But I found these." She handed me several pages of photocopied documents. They detailed similar incidents at other wetland drilling sites, unexplained phenomena, local legends of water creatures, workers who went missing. "They knew," I said quietly. "They've been disturbing these Guardians all over." "And covering it up," Audrey added. "But not anymore. I've got a publisher interested in a book. The whole story, Raymond, with your permission." I looked out at the rain, considering. Since that night, I'd felt the changes in me growing stronger. I could calm the waters during storms now, or call fish to my hand. Just small things, but growing. The blue lines had spread up my arms to my shoulders. Sometimes, in the right light, my eyes glowed faintly. "Tell the story," I said finally. "People need to know what's happening to the water." "But I know," she said gently. "I'll keep your transformation vague, a mystery for the readers." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the rain. Audrey had come back every week since that night, documenting the changes in me, bringing news from the outside world. "I found your mother's grave," she said suddenly. "Or what I think is it." I looked at her sharply. "Where?" "Deep in the marsh. A cypress with her name carved in it. Around it the water's different, clearer, with plants growing that shouldn't be able to grow in that soil." I nodded. I'd sensed something like that, but hadn't been able to locate it precisely. "The Guardian honors her sacrifice." "What happens next, Raymond?" Audrey asked, her voice soft. "With you, I mean." I held out my hand, palm up. Rain gathered there, forming a small pool that began to glow with that now familiar blue light. With a thought, I shaped it into a tiny whirlpool, spinning gently above my palm. "I don't know exactly," I admitted, "but I've been having dreams, other places with water that needs protection, other guardians calling out, 'You're leaving?'" The disappointment in her voice was clear. Not yet. This bayou is still my home. But someday, I let the water fall from my hand. Someday, I think I'll be needed elsewhere. The balance is broken in too many places. A sound came from the water then, not quite a splash, more like a gentle question. I felt it more than heard it. Is that... Audrey leaned forward, peering into the rain-rippled bayou. Yes, I said, it's still here, watching, waiting, teaching me. Sometimes I caught glimpses of it, a scaled form moving beneath the surface, eyes glowing in the depths. Not a monster anymore, but not quite natural either. Changed, like me. A sign of what happens when humans forget their connection to the water, to the land. Will others become like you? Audrey asked. Other guardians. I thought about that, about the changes spreading through my body, the knowledge flowing into my mind from something ancient and patient. I think they already exist, I said, in places where the old agreements were remembered, where the balance was kept. As if in answer, a distant howl rose over the bayou, not quite animal, not quite human. The sound no longer chilled my blood. Now it felt like a greeting. Audrey shivered slightly. I still can't get used to that. You don't have to, I said, smiling. You just have to tell the story. Remind people that the water has its own guardians, that some agreements go deeper than any law made by governments. The rain began to ease, sunlight breaking through the clouds. In the shallow water near my cabin, small blue lights began to glow, the bioluminescence that now appeared whenever I was feeling strong emotion. Audrey snapped a picture, then put her camera away. Next week, same time, she asked, standing. To leave, I nodded. I'll be here. For now, at least, I would be. The guardian of Whisper Marsh. The man who was becoming something more. The beginning of a new pact between people and water. As Audrey walked back toward her car, I stepped off my porch into the shallow water. It rose to meet me, swirling around my legs with a gentle, welcoming touch. In the distance, something large moved beneath the surface, coming closer. The bayou had a new guardian now, and the water remembered. I never wanted to come to this God-forsaken lookout tower, not after what happened back in Seattle, but when you shoot a suspect, even if they were reaching for what you thought was a gun, and it turns out to be a cell phone, you don't get many choices. So here I am, Michael Dawson, ex-city cop turned forest ranger, staring at trees until my eyes blur. The brass called it a cooling-off period. I call it exile. My first night here, I woke up to strange lights dancing across my ceiling. The aurora borealis, way too far south to be normal. The colors swirled like oil in water, greens and purples stretching across the night sky. Beautiful, sure, but something about it made my skin crawl. The lookout tower isn't much. A small cabin perched on stilts above the tree line. A single room, with windows on all sides. My bed, a small kitchen, radio equipment and a desk where I'm supposed to keep logs of, well, nothing happening. The isolation hits you quick up here. I've been sober for 3 weeks now, longest stretch since the shooting. I thought the quiet would drive me to drink more, but something about this place, the clean air, the routine, it's helping. I wake up, I check the weather, I scan the horizon for smoke, I eat, I sleep, simple. Today I found footprints while hiking the North Ridge. Big ones, too big for a human. But the strangest thing wasn't the size. About halfway through, the muddy patch, the prints changed. Like whatever made them shifted in mid-step. Started as what looked like barefoot human prints, ended looking like something with claws. Probably just 2 different animals walking the same path. That's what I told myself as I took pictures. That's what I'll put in my report. But I know what I saw. And as the sun sets and those weird lights start up again, I can't shake the feeling that something out there in those ancient trees is watching my tower. Something that's studying me. I found a deer this morning. What was left of it anyway. The thing that bothers me isn't that it was dead. That's nature. It's how it died. The cuts were too clean, like someone used surgical tools. No animal tears apart its prey with that kind of precision. I've seen enough crime scenes to know the difference between animal attacks and something else. The radio's been acting weird too. Late at night, when the sky lights up with those strange auroras, I hear whispers between the static. Not clear enough to make out words, but definitely voices. When I reported it to base camp, Frank just laughed and blamed it on solar flares. "You're getting spooked by space weather, Dawson," he said. "But I don't think so. Last night I woke up at 3 a.m. with that feeling you get when someone's staring at you. I keep my gun on the nightstand now, not under it. I know I locked the door, but this morning my coffee mug was on the wrong shelf, and my journal was open to a page I don't remember writing on. Someone, or something, was in here while I slept. The supply delivery came today. Thomas Whitefeather brought it up instead of the usual guy. He's from the local tribe, must be in his late 60s, with eyes that seem to look through you rather than at you. "How you settling in, Officer Dawson?" he asked, emphasizing officer, like he knew my past. "Fine," I lied. "Quiet up here?" Thomas nodded slowly. "These mountains have boundaries older than any map," he said while unloading my supplies. "Some shouldn't be crossed." Before he left, he touched the doorframe of my cabin and muttered something in his language. A blessing? A warning? I didn't ask. That afternoon, I took my binoculars to scan the tree line, part of my job looking for fires. That's when I saw it. A tall figure standing at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by pine shadows, too tall to be human. It was watching my tower through what looked like binoculars too. When I grabbed my rifle scope for a better look, it was gone. I'm starting to think I'm not alone up here, and I'm damn sure whatever's out there isn't just passing through. The dream started 4 nights ago. I'm lying in my bed, but I can't move. Something tall stands in the corner of the room, watching me, taking notes, like I'm some kind of lab rat. I wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. Last night was the worst. In the dream, the thing leaned over me, its breath on my face. When I woke up, my window was open. I know I closed it before bed. I always do. The radio conversations with Frank at base camp have been strange. Yesterday, I was giving my routine morning report when he suddenly asked, "What was that thing you just said about the lights?" "What lights?" I didn't say anything about lights. There was a long pause. "Huh, must be the connection. You cut out for about 30 seconds there, but I could have sworn I heard your voice talking." I didn't tell him that my radio had been on the whole time, that I hadn't stopped talking, that whatever he heard wasn't me. This morning brought a welcome change. Human contact. Rebecca Mills, wildlife biologist, showed up in a beat-up Jeep to study the dropping predator population. Smart, no nonsense, with quick eyes that don't miss much. After weeks alone, just having a normal conversation felt like therapy. "The wolves and mountain lions are avoiding this valley," she explained, spreading out her tracking maps. "It's like something's scaring them off. Any ideas?" I almost told her about the footprints, the whispers, the dreams. Instead, I just shrugged. "Haven't seen much out here." She looked at me like she knew I was holding back. After she left to set, up her research camp about a mile south, I found an old metal lockbox tucked under a loose floorboard in my cabin. Inside was a journal. Not mine. It belonged to Ranger Jim Preston, 1986. The last entry gave me chills. It's mimicking my voice. "Now!" called Sarah on the radio, pretending to be me. I don't know what it wants, but it's learning, getting closer. If you're reading this, then I didn't make it out, and it's probably watching you too. Preston was reported lost in a hiking accident. Last year, they never found his body. Tonight, as the aurora glows outside my window, I can't shake the feeling that Preston didn't leave the mountain at all, and whatever got him is coming for me next. Rebecca and I decided to team up. Safety. In numbers, we told ourselves. But really, I think we both just needed someone else to confirm we weren't going crazy. I found a cave system on the North Ridge, she said over coffee in my cabin. Native carvings inside, old ones, and footprints that don't match any animal I've ever studied. We hiked there together. The cave mouth was small, hidden behind a fallen tree. Inside, it opened up into tunnels that seemed to go on forever. The air felt wrong, heavy and cold, like standing in a freezer. Our flashlights caught strange formations on the walls, not stalactites, but something that looked almost grown, like twisted coral. And the footprints, the same ones I'd seen before, shifting from human-like to something else. What makes tracks like these? Rebecca whispered, her scientific confidence slipping. I didn't answer. I was staring at the wall where our lights had just revealed ancient carvings, stick figures of men, a taller figure among them, and scenes that made my stomach turn, the tall figure pulling something out of the humans, something glowing. In the next scene, the tall figure had a human face. On our way back, we found more carvings on the trunks of the oldest trees. Warnings in a language neither of us knew, but the meaning seemed clear from the images. Stay away. Thomas Whitefeather showed up the next day, supposedly to check if I needed anything, but I think he somehow knew we'd found the caves. Those woods have been home to my people for thousands of years, he said, refusing to sit down. But there are places even we do not go, places where the Changer walks. The Changer? Rebecca asked. Thomas looked at her with those knowing eyes. A being that takes what it wants. Knowledge, shapes, lives. It walks between worlds, studying us like we study ants. That night, as Rebecca headed back to her camp, I felt my thoughts becoming foggy. Ideas that didn't feel like my own kept popping into my head, an urge to go back to the cave alone, to wait there in the dark. When I called Rebecca on the radio to check in, she said she'd been feeling the same thing. It's like something's trying to pull thoughts out of my head, she said, voice shaking, and put new ones in. I hung up the radio and locked my door. But locks don't keep out something that can get inside your mind. The aurora was brighter tonight than I'd ever seen it. The whole sky pulsed with light, casting strange moving shadows across the forest floor. I couldn't sleep, so I sat on my lookout platform with binoculars, scanning the trees. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a tall man at the edge of the clearing, but as I watched, its shape changed. Like watching clay being molded by invisible hands. Its arms stretched longer, its back hunched, hair sprouted across its body. In seconds, what looked like a man became an 8-foot hairy creature, like the Bigfoot stories but worse, because I'd seen it change. I radioed Rebecca immediately. You need to get over here, now. I'm a mile out, she replied. What's going on? Then I heard her voice again, not from the radio, but from right outside my cabin. Michael, can you help me? I'm hurt. My blood ran cold. The radio was still in my hand, Rebecca still talking through it, asking what was wrong. Stay where you are, I whispered into the radio. Whatever you do, don't come here. I grabbed my gun and looked out the window. Rebecca, or something that looked exactly like her, stood at the edge of the clearing, arm bleeding. But her face was wrong, like someone who'd only seen pictures of humans trying to make a smile. Michael, please help, it called in Rebecca's voice, but with strange pauses between words. The real Rebecca's voice crackled through the radio. Michael, what's happening? I crept down the tower stairs, gun ready. I had to know what I was dealing with. As I reached the tree line, I froze. 20 feet away stood me. It was like looking in a mirror. Except this copy of me wasn't quite right. The eyes were too wide, the stance awkward. It tilted its head like a curious animal. Then, without its lips moving, I heard a voice directly in my head. Interesting specimens. Such fear, such confusion. I want to understand. My head exploded with pain. Images flooded. My mind, stars, other worlds, beings made of light. Knowledge that felt ancient and alien. I must have blacked out. When I woke up, I was back in my bed. The sun was rising. I had no memory of returning to the cabin, but I knew things now. Things about the universe I couldn't possibly know. And I was certain of one thing. I wasn't alone in my own head anymore. Rebecca found me the next morning, curled up in bed, mumbling about stars and doorways. She thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. We need to figure out what we're dealing with, she said once I'd pulled myself together, and how to protect ourselves. I spent the day digging through the old ranger station files. Box after dusty. Box of incident reports going back decades, people gone missing, strange animal sightings, unexplained phenomena during Aurora events, all filed away and forgotten. Listen to this, I said to Rebecca. 1973, Ranger Thompson reports finding a hiker wandering in circles, claiming he'd been followed by himself for 3 days. And this one from 1958, she added, holding up a yellowed paper. 2 loggers encountered what they described as a tall, hairy man who changed into their foreman before disappearing into a cave. The pieces were starting to fit together. Whatever this thing was, it had been here a long time. Thomas showed up that afternoon with a small leather pouch. Iron powder, salt and herbs from my people, he said, handing it to me. It won't stop the changer, but it might confuse it. Place it at your doors and windows. What is this thing, Thomas? I asked. Really? He sat down heavily. It's not from here. It slips through when the lights dance in the sky. It studies us, takes shapes, takes memories sometimes. He tapped his temple. It's curious, like a child, but a child that doesn't understand pain or death. How do we stop it? Rebecca asked. You don't. You survive it. Thomas looked grim. It hates mirrors, can't copy what's already copying, and recorded sounds confuse it. It doesn't understand echoes. Most important, sunlight burns its stolen shapes. It can only hold human form in darkness or shadow. That night, we made a list of everything we'd learned. It changes shape, but not perfectly. It can speak in our voices and put thoughts in our heads. It can't maintain human form in direct sunlight. It's confused by mirrors and recorded sounds. It's most active during Aurora events. It seems to be using the cave system somehow. It's been here for generations. It's studying us, Rebecca said. Like we're lab rats. No, I replied, remembering the images in my head. It's preparing for something bigger. The cave system. It's trying to create some kind of doorway there. Just then, my radio crackled to life. Frank's voice came through, sounding annoyed. Dawson, what the hell kind of reports have you been filing? Bigfoot sightings, shapeshifters. I'm coming up there tomorrow to check on you. Great. The last thing we needed was a skeptic blundering in. I looked at Rebecca. We need to set traps. We need evidence no one can deny. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The same fear I felt. We were no longer the observers here. We were the observed. We were setting up cameras around the clearing when we heard someone crashing through the underbrush. A young guy with expensive hiking gear stumbled into view, looking like he'd seen a ghost. Thank God, he gasped. People, real people. His name was Jason Harding, 29, adventure tourist from Portland who'd gone off trail 3 days ago. He was shaking, eyes darting around like a spooked animal. There's something out there, he said, gulping coffee in my cabin. It followed me for miles, calling my name, looking like my brother. But my brother's been dead for 5 years. I exchanged looks with Rebecca, another witness. We know, I told him. We're trying to document it. Jason's hands trembled. I saw it change right in front of me, from my brother into something else, something not human. We brought him into our plan. With Frank coming tomorrow, we needed solid evidence. Jason knew cameras. He worked in film production. He helped us set up recording equipment at strategic points around the tower and the path to the caves. Rebecca had the idea about the mirrors. We hung small mirrors from trees, creating a barrier of reflections around the cabin. "If Thomas is right, this might keep it confused," she said. That night, while Jason slept, Rebecca and I watched the aurora pulse overhead. "The activity is getting stronger," she whispered. "Whatever it's doing in those caves, it's accelerating." I told her about what I'd seen in my vision, other worlds, beings made of light, doorways between dimensions. "I think it's creating a gateway," I said. "A way to bring more of its kind here." She squeezed my hand. Her touch anchored me, reminded me I wasn't alone in this nightmare. In the morning, Frank arrived, his department truck kicking up dust. 50s, overweight, with the tired look of a man counting days to retirement. He wasn't happy. "What the hell, Dawson?" he said, waving my reports. "Footprints that change shape? Mysterious voices. You're supposed to be watching for fires, not writing science fiction." "It's all true," Jason cut in. "I saw it too." Frank looked at the three of us like we were crazy. "Show me something real, or I'm pulling you off this mountain." We led him to the cave entrance. I didn't want to go back in there, but we needed Frank to believe us. As we approached, I felt the familiar pressure in my head, that sense of something trying to get in. Rebecca stumbled, pressing her palm against her temple. "It knows we're here," she whispered, "and it's angry." The mouth of the cave seemed darker than before. Frank clicked on his flashlight, unimpressed. "Let's see this monster." "Of yours," he said, stepping inside. We followed the darkness swallowing us. None of us noticed the shadows moving unnaturally behind us, blocking the way out. The deeper we went into the cave, the colder it got. Our breath made little clouds in the beam of our flashlights. The walls glittered strangely, like they were covered in tiny crystals. "What's making those marks?" Frank asked, pointing his light at strange patterns on the cave wall. They looked almost like writing, but no language I'd ever seen. "It's communicating," Rebecca whispered. "Learning." Frank snorted. "You people have been up here too long. This is just mineral deposits and—" "Quiet," I hissed, raising my hand. "Listen." From deeper in the cave came a sound like whispers, but not quite human, like someone learning how to talk. We'd set up trail cameras and recording equipment earlier, hoping to document the creature. Jason took point, checking each device as we passed. "Camera 3 is missing," he said, frowning at an empty tripod. "And camera 4's been turned around, facing the wall." "Your Bigfoot's a critic," Frank joked, but his voice had lost its confidence. Then Jason's flashlight caught something that made my blood freeze. About 50 feet ahead stood me, and next to me was another me, and another. 3 perfect copies of Michael Dawson staring at us with empty eyes. "What the hell?" Frank stumbled. Back the copies didn't move. They just watched, heads tilted at the exact same angle, like puppets with the same puppeteer. "It's trying to confuse us," Rebecca said, grabbing my arm. "Which is the real you?" "I'm right here," I said. But one of the copies said the exact same thing at the exact same time. Frank pulled his gun. "Stay back, all of you!" "Frank, wait!" I started, but he wasn't listening. His eyes were wild with fear. He pointed his gun at the nearest copy, then at me, unsure. "It's not human," he shouted. "It's some kind of trick." "We need to leave," Jason said, backing toward the entrance. "Now!" Frank fired. The shot exploded in the confined space. One of the Michaels fell, blood pooling beneath it. But then the body changed. The face melted away, revealing something else underneath. Not quite human, not quite animal. "You killed it!" Rebecca gasped. The other copies screamed, not in my voice anymore, but something high and alien that made us cover our ears in pain. Suddenly, the cave floor beneath Jason cracked open. He didn't even have time to scream before he was gone, pulled down into darkness. The floor sealed up like it had never opened. "Jason!" I shouted, rushing to where he'd been. Frank fired again, wild with panic. The bullet hit the real me this time, grazing my shoulder. I fell back, clutching the wound. "You idiot!" Rebecca screamed at Frank. "That's the real Michael." The remaining copies closed in. Frank kept firing until his gun clicked empty. Then the copies were on him. I couldn't. "See what they did." Rebecca pulled me toward the exit, but his screams followed us all the way out of the cave. We burst into the twilight, the aurora already starting to glow overhead. Rebecca helped me back to the tower, my shoulder bleeding badly. "It took Jason," I gasped as she bandaged me. "And Frank." "I know," she said, hands trembling. "And it's getting stronger." That night, as I drifted in and out of consciousness from blood loss, I knew two things for certain. We were running out of time, and next time we faced the creature, we'd be facing it alone. By morning, my shoulder had stopped bleeding, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw those copies of myself. I saw Frank's face as they took him. I saw the floor swallowing Jason whole. "We have to go back," I told Rebecca as she changed my bandage. "The aurora's getting stronger each night. If that thing is opening a doorway, we have to stop it." "How?" she asked. "We can't fight it. We can't even tell what's real anymore." I thought about what Thomas had told us. Mirrors, recorded sounds. "Sunlight, we find a way," I said. We spent the day preparing. We gathered every mirror we could find. We recorded our voices on my old tape recorder. Rebecca rigged up emergency flares that could mimic sunlight for a few crucial seconds. As the sun set, Thomas Whitefeather appeared at my door. He seemed to know what we were planning. "The gateway opens tonight," he said, looking at the first. Flickers of aurora overhead. During the strongest lights. He handed me a small knife made of what looked like iron. The handle was wrapped in leather, inscribed with tribal symbols. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said. "He faced the Changer too. He wounded it, drove it back to its world for a time." "You're not coming with us?" Rebecca asked. Thomas shook his head. "My part is to remember, to warn the next ones." He touched my forehead. "But you've been inside its mind. It's been inside yours. You're connected now." As darkness fell, Rebecca and I headed toward the cave. The aurora blazed overhead, brighter than I'd ever seen it. The colors swirled and pulsed, and with each pulse, I felt the pressure in my head grow. "It knows we're coming," I said. The cave entrance glowed with an eerie blue light from within. As we stepped inside, mirrors ready, I could feel the air buzzing with energy. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, longer than it had been before. The walls pulsed with the same rhythm as the aurora. We pushed forward, the glow getting brighter. Then we entered a massive chamber that hadn't been there before. The ceiling soared upward, disappearing into darkness. The walls were covered in those strange markings. And in the center, "Oh my God," Rebecca whispered. A swirling vortex of light hung in the air, like a vertical pool of water made of the same colors as the aurora. Around it stood 5 copies of me, arms raised, chanting in a language that hurt my ears. But they weren't perfect copies anymore. They were changing, shifting between my form and something else, something with too many limbs, too many eyes. Behind the vortex, I saw shapes moving, waiting to come through. "Michael," one of the copies said, turning to me. Its face was half mine, half something insectoid. "You've come to join us." "I've come to stop you," I said, raising the iron knife. They all laughed with the same voice. My voice, but wrong. "Stop us. You can't even find the real you anymore," it said. Suddenly I wasn't sure which one I was. Was I the one holding the knife? Or was I one of them, just thinking I was still human? Rebecca grabbed my arm. "Michael, don't listen. It's in your head." I raised the mirrors. The copies hissed, turning away from their own reflections. "You don't belong here," I said, stepping forward. I hit play on the tape recorder. Our voices echoed through the chamber, creating a cacophony that made the copies clutch their heads in pain. The vortex pulsed, growing larger. Through it, I caught glimpses of another world, a place of strange geometries and impossible colors. "Too late," the nearest copy said. "The door is open. Rebecca lit a flare. The sudden burst of light made the copies scream, their stolen forms burning away under the artificial sun. But the vortex remained. I knew what I had to do. I stepped. Toward the swirling gateway, iron knife raised. "Michael, no!" Rebecca shouted. The nearest copy lunged at me. We fell, tumbling toward the vortex. I plunged the knife into its chest. It screamed, not my voice anymore, but something ancient and terrible. As we fell into the swirling light together, the last thing I saw was Rebecca's face, reaching for me as the cave began to collapse around her. Then nothing but light and pain, and a sense of falling between worlds. They found me 3 days later, half frozen in the collapsed cave entrance. No sign of Frank or Jason, no sign of the creature, just me, clutching a strange iron knife with symbols no expert could identify. Rebecca survived too. She made it out before the cave collapsed, raised the alarm. They called it an earthquake, a freak natural disaster. The aurora activity was noted as unusual, but not unprecedented in scientific journals. I spent 2 months in the hospital. Physical recovery was quick, just hypothermia and some cuts. The psychological evaluation took longer. How do you explain that you fought a shape-shifting entity from another dimension without sounding completely insane? So I lied, said I got lost, said the isolation and stress had caused delusions, said whatever they wanted to hear until they let me go. But I knew the truth, and so did Rebecca. We meet once a month at a diner halfway between her university lab and my new apartment in a small coastal town. We don't talk much about what happened. We don't need to. "Still having the dreams?" she asked today over coffee. I nodded. Every night, I see other worlds, other dimensions. Knowledge that no human should have fills my head when I sleep. "And the other thing?" she asked quietly. I pulled up my sleeve. "The strange marks that appeared on my arms after that night have spread. They look like bruises in the shape of the symbols from the cave wall. They don't hurt, but they pulse with the rhythm of my heartbeat." "It's getting worse," I admitted. Last week, I woke up on my roof with no memory of climbing there. The night before, my neighbor swears she saw me standing in my yard at 3 a.m. staring at the sky. Except I was asleep in my bed. At least I think I was. "You wounded it," Rebecca said, taking my hand. "Thomas says that creates a connection, a bond. The worst part is not knowing if I'm turning into it or if it's still out there, turning into me. Sometimes I catch glimpses of myself in store windows, and my reflection moves a half-second too late. The doctors found something strange in my latest brain scan. Areas lighting up that shouldn't be active in humans. They want to run more tests. I catch myself watching people sometimes, studying them, like I'm taking notes for someone else. Last night, the aurora returned. I watched it from my window, feeling that old familiar pressure in my head. A voice that might have been my own whispered, "The door is still open." I called Thomas immediately. He wasn't surprised. "The boundary between worlds remains thin where blood was spilled," he said. "You carry the wound just as it does. Is it coming back?" I asked. His silence was answer enough. "Yesterday, I found a journal I don't remember buying. Inside, I've apparently been documenting human behavioral responses to emotional stimuli. The handwriting is mine, but the words feel alien." Rebecca says we should go public with what we know. Warn people, but who would believe us? For now, I watch the skies. I keep the iron knife close, and when I look in the mirror each morning, I count to 3. If my reflection takes longer to respond, I'll know. The changer is patient. It's studying, learning. And I'm afraid that next time it won't just be studying us. It'll be becoming us.